Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Scrutiny Committee for Corporate and Resources. I'm Councillor Filmer, Chairman of the committee. Just before we start, a couple of welcomes. House and welcome to our first Scrutiny on tour. So we will be travelling around the various former district areas as well as being in Taunton. So welcome to the first on the road. Just before we start, there's a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who are in the room with me. Just to remind you, there's no planned fire drill this morning, so if alarms go off, they are real. And please make your way out through the exits. Officers will show you where to safely congregate outside the building. If I could ask that any members who've got mobile phones with them, if you could make sure they're either silent or turned off, please, just so they don't interrupt. And again, if anyone needs to have a drink during the meeting, they're over to the side, both hot and cold, and also on that same side of the room to my left are the toilets if anyone needs those facilities during the meeting. Hear me, if someone could just respond. I don't know. Is anyone online that could just confirm that you can hear the meeting?
Yes, no problem for me.
Yeah, all good.
Thank you very much. Just to remind members and those joining us that the agenda pack with all the papers is available via the ModGov system and directly from the council website, and that link was sent out to members. Being told there may be no video. That's come through on the chat. If I can just let you have a look at that one, I just run through the other. Members, if you're asked to speak, if you've indicated to speak, could you just state clearly who you are for those who are joining us online or those listening to the audio recording later? That would be just very helpful. And again, members have been advised how the microphone system works in this room. So again, if you can make sure you use the microphones, because that will help people hear us online and within the room. We'd like to welcome any members of the public who are joining us online. Hopefully you'll be able to follow our proceedings clearly. We advise just that this meeting is being audio recorded today, as I mentioned earlier, so that will be a record that people can listen back to in the future. Agendas are now sent out and read electronically. Could I ask members, when you're speaking on an item, if you could identify where within the agenda it is and identify a page number, that would be really helpful for those, again, trying to follow. If we move on to our agenda items for today, do we have any apologies, please?
For whom Councillor Pearce is substituting. Apologies from Councillor Cottle, for whom Councillor Hobhouse is substituting. We've also received apologies from Councillor Pearlstone, and I understand Councillor Rodriguez is on his way to the meeting, so will be joining us shortly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting that's been circulated to all members. Are there any amendments to those minutes? And if not, could I have a proposer? Is that seconded? Thank you. And all those in favour, please indicate to me to sign them. That's clearly carried. We'll do that at the end of the meeting. Just a bit of an update from those minutes. Members will be aware that obviously we agreed that we would form 2 type and finish groups to look into assets, commercial assets, and the asset and disposal of assets. We have had responses, and I'd like to thank those councillors who volunteered to go onto those working groups. And just so that you are aware, the assessment of and disposal of assets working group will consist of councillors Ham, Smedley, Johnson, and myself. And the commercial asset and realisation will be councillors Lovell, Cottle, Seeb, and Trimnell. We tried to go with preferences where people have shown preferences, and hopefully we will be sending out dates for those with officers obviously to go through and get the work underway on those two groups. So again, thank you for those who volunteered for those. We move then on to item 3 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations that members have that aren't already declared, such as memberships or other town, parish and city councils? Not seeing any, so thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is public question time. I'm not aware that we've had any public questions submitted. So that moves on to the first item, item 5, which is the draft asset disposal policy. And Ollie Woodhams. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, Councillor White.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to introduce this item and make a few points. If members remember, before vesting day, we took the asset management strategy paper to full council, and it was agreed along with the plan. And one of the items in the plan was to actually put together a asset disposal policy. And this is what you have in front of you. There are some slides, and I have a colleague here, Sally, who's going to take you through them. And it is part of creating a framework about how we handle assets in the future. A very open and transparent one which we need to do, but at the same time recognising that we are working within a commercial market, and therefore we need to be sensitive as to how and when we communicate with things. But I think you'll see when you see the slides that the key 6 objectives of the asset management strategy are well and truly Sally Stark.
Hello, I'm Sally Stark. I'm one of the asset managers in the strategic asset management team, and I'm a sort of joint author of this policy. And we're inviting you. You're comfortable with the direction of travel here. So basically, the assets disposal policy. First slide, please. Next slide, please. This is replacing the 5 different policies from the county council and the former district councils. It doesn't cover the commercial investment properties or housing revenue account properties. Are we having trouble with the slides? Yeah, silent with the slide. I continue with the introduction on that. It doesn't cover academy conversions either. Community asset transfers and the agricultural estate do fall under this overarching policy, but they will have separate supplemental policies in due course. So basically, we're allowed to dispose of properties under the Section 123 of the Local Government Act, and we have a duty to get best value for those properties, and we are also able to dispose of economic, social or environmental benefits to the local area.
I'd like to ask you to pause online and in the room. This is part of the papers that we've got, as well as the presentation is there. So I think we're on where we're talking about the legislation. That's on page 17 of our agenda pack. So if, sorry, carry on, please.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on to page 4 now. And the asset management strategy and plan, as Councillor White has said, gives us some headline points here. That the council's estate is financially sustainable, efficient and effective. So that obviously means that we don't retain property that for which there is no need. So next slide, please. The key principles for the disposal policy are that we don't hold surplus property unless there's any current or likely potential projected future needs. So we do assess any future need. We don't get rid of things and then have to go out and get some, reacquire them in due course. We usually dispose things on the open market.
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. We are having some technical issues now with the report being seen. We can see it in the room, but they now can't see it online. So if you could just bear with us 1 minute. So for those of you who are joining us online, the fact that you're not seeing the report is a technical glitch we've got here. It's not your end. We are trying to get that sorted. So if you bear with us just for a couple of minutes, we are continuing to do that. Our members happy that we continue to hear the presentation and we can follow it in the room. But as I say, for those online, I would suggest you do look at your agenda pack and follow it through the pages there. But in the meantime, we will try and sort out this technical glitch. And as I say, Sally, I'm really sorry to interrupt your presentation, but just felt it was useful for those online to understand why they'd suddenly been plunged into darkness. So thank you.
Just carry on.
I think we're getting on to the next page. The key principles, yes. So we usually dispose of properties on the open market unless there are good reasons not to do so. And those reasons, maybe there's a special purchaser, such as a neighbour or a tenant, and those special reasons will be clearly evaluated. We do have a duty to dispose of property. Sorry, next page, please. For best consideration, and in most cases, this is demonstrated through exposure to the open market. So there are occasions where an off-market disposal is appropriate, and then we do valuations. We either do them in-house, there is a team of registered valuers in-house, or exceptionally, if it's a specialist property, that would be an external instruction to a valuer to just to demonstrate that we are following the best value requirement of section 123. Next slide, please. We aim to be transparent in everything we do. So where we consider an asset to be under consideration for being surplus, we will engage with all the council departments, also with local members and the lead member and the asset management group. So local sensitivities can be considered, and any particular requirements for the route to disposal can also be evaluated. So we do seek to engage with all people who might be affected. There is a governance procedure. If the value of the asset is over 500,000, then it will be a key decision, and there is a strict governance process for that. It's published on the forward plan, and the corporate this committee has the power to call it in and for review. Values under £500,000 will be subject to a non-key decision paper, which also requires engagement with local and relevant lead members and consultation as part of the decision-making process. Local members are, of course, bound by their code of conduct, and many of these disposals will be commercially sensitive, and local members naturally will follow that code of conduct. We have some discretion when consulting with town and parish councils because they're not bound by that same code. So we do consult or engage with local town and parish councils and city councils, and actually at the appropriate time, if applicable. Small sites that are considered to be surplus will also they'll be listed for consideration at the bi-monthly AMG Asset Management Group meetings. So they'll be actually public, and local members and lead members will obviously flag up any issues there might be locally there. So the officers will also have the responsibility to consider the local community when they're making the decision, so that they will consider it and see the impact on the local community. So we're hoping that the framework here covers everything that people are expecting, and we're happy to.
Thank you very much. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. Councillor Trimble, start with you.
Hello there. Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask a question about the properties sold at undervalue. Who values the properties? And I think it did say somewhere, but how is that valuation carried out? And what percentage of property do we sell undervalue? And what are the circumstances around that, please?
It is actually quite a small proportion of properties. It would be where there's a demonstrated community use, or perhaps an asset that the community asset transfer that a town or parish council might wish to take on. There would be a formal valuation, an open market valuation, which is to all comers, undertaken either in-house or by an external valuer. And then we could demonstrate the loss of value to the council. So, and that would have to clearly align with a policy that, so for example, a housing site might be for social housing. That wouldn't be the top value you could get for a site, but it would be obviously in line with the council policy to provide affordable housing and social housing.
Thank you.
I think I've got a couple of other councillors indicated, Councillor Seaver and Councillor Locke, so Councillor Seaver.
So there were three aspects which leapt out at me. One was to do with missing action on our part to make sure we've got effective policy delivery around the evaluation of whether there's anything we could do that actually increases or improves either the value or public service delivery as part of the process. So, for example, there might be a piece of land that we want to place a local development order on before we sell it, because we'd sell it for a far higher value. That step of checking to see whether there's anything we do to enhance the sale seems to be missing. Secondly, I thought on page 19, the elements where you're dealing with partners really sort of stated back to front. I'd actually put it the other way around, because I think there are some processes we need to go through which sift the disposals into strategies for disposing of them. One of which is there a strategic need to deal with a particular sort of market? For example, a very large land assembly that has been done might need a particular class of London client in order to even be viable. It wouldn't be a local sale. So I thought that the triage up front was a little weak on page 19. And finally, a lot of this asset pool includes land which has been in public ownership for some time. And one of the safeguarding elements for effective disposal is checking to see, for example, we don't put TPOs on our own trees. We may well have a very strong view on, for example, peripheral trees around the edge of a site. I'm thinking about one which is in one of the other papers actually, where because we've owned it for so long, it hasn't got normal safeguards, and we would want to make sure that we have been through other departments to see whether, for example, the land had come to us through planning for a particular purpose that was tied up in that, or whether there was some public amenity benefit that we needed to safeguard. I think we just need to recognise a lot of what we're talking about in this asset pool has been with us for a long time, and we've been safeguarding it as a local authority rather than it being safeguarded through the normal private safety rules. It's only fair to do all that work before you go to the market, because those are going to control the sale.
Thank you, Councillor Seaver. Really comprehensive and question I think goes to the heart of the problem we have here. So there's in many disposals there's an awful lot of important detail and context to take into account, and you've covered what's the strategic intent here, what are we trying to achieve, what are the objectives, the balance between sort of commercial gain and maximising capital receipts versus the policy context and social value and all that sort of stuff. And then that community impact and what the future use of a parcel of land means for the people living around it, and how we balance that local context with the objective that we have as a unitary council of using our resources to benefit all of the citizens in Somerset. And I've been involved in this for 3.5 years. These questions come up time and time again, and I think, you know, we can set a policy context, but how we go through the process is really tricky. And I think we've got to bear in mind that we'll be doing this at scale and sometimes at pace, either for financial reasons or for commercial reasons, where there's an opportunity. So as an officer team, it's very, very difficult for us to kind of really, I think, give members everything they want in this area. We have to strike a balance, I think, between the roles of officers and professional officers. And we have a team of qualified valuers and surveyors with many, many hundreds of years of experience between them in this new, much larger unitary council. So we're paying them a lot of money, and on things like the precise details of the overage clause and making sure that the council gets best value and checking that the detailed work has been done. I think there's a certain amount that members need to leave and delegate to officers and rely on that professional judgment and trust that professional judgment. But that's one aspect of, I think, our response to your question. So the role of scrutiny committee then is something that we're really keen to get some feedback on. You know, absolutely, scrutiny will have a really important role in checking and providing that check and balance on some of the bigger disposals. And it'll be useful to have this discussion at length with Finish Group. I think this session is about setting the context for how we sort of actually manage a process where, you know, the scheme of delegation and the constitution gives Bob as chair a right to say, I think this needs to come to committee, and that's the sort of hard and fast of it. But we cannot bring every single disposal. We would have to meet every week for you to do that. And so how we find the right balance there between things that and how the committee might scrutinise a programme of disposals without necessarily getting involved in a level of detail that perhaps you were drawn to there, Councillor Siebert, in your question. And then we have the role of the officers in the asset management team who are professional surveyors and have a commercial as well as a sort of, you know, public benefit strategic view against the planning process, which is there to, you know, control development and there to very much look after those local interests. And I think we have to sort of make sure we understand and agree what the function of the asset management team is, which really I think is set by the asset management strategy and really is looking after the interests of the whole of Somerset under that strategy, and what the role of the planning function is in making sure that any particular development on any piece of land is right and fits well with the planning policy objectives and is sensitive to the local community. And I think what we're here today to do is sort of set a policy context. I think then how we adopt and implement that policy is another matter that I'm really looking forward to having discussions with the Task and Finish group about, because, you know, we don't know, and I think trying to find that balance. The other thing I just wanted to raise, your second point, I think, on, you know, how is strategy set for a disposal, and really for me, on the sort of smaller value stuff, that will tend to be guided by officers. There are checks and balances in place, and over certain thresholds, the lead member would always be involved, and chair of scrutiny would always be involved. But when it comes to sort of more material issues, really there's a real opportunity to do a range of different things with a site that comes up, or even beyond just one particular site, setting strategies for multiple sites that we might look to put to the market at one time. I think setting that strategic strategy is an executive function, and so really that's where, you know, asset management group comes in. I think it's the role of the asset management group to deliver the asset management strategy and the asset management plan, and on individual cases that will be very much their function. I'll probably just correct my colleague here, and that the asset management group does meet in private, so those minutes and the list won't be published. I think then local members will be involved at an early stage under this policy, and then it comes back to that question: how and when do we get scrutiny involved in individual decisions? And I think that's, we will take this policy forward to executive with your comments as a committee fed into that. But I think we've probably got more work to do once the policy is set, to just understand, how we come here, how often we come here, what we talk about, when you get involved, because it's a really big topic, and I'm really grateful you raised it. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Councillor White?
The only thing I would add is that what we've been working on with this policy, which is an amalgamation of previous policies, but also I think the step forward is there is going to be a very transparent process which we can all see and understand. We also need to be quite clear that the asset management group consists of 3 executive members. No longer will there be a single member making decisions of any significance, which I think is really important too. And that we have this policy against a broader asset management strategy. So that again, there is understanding and transparency. And we always must remember that we need to keep the separation from what happens at planning, away from us being a landlord putting forward a piece of land for planning, which on occasions will occur where it's deemed that the disposal strategy of a particular piece of land is to seek planning prior to the landowner would do on occasions. But as a council, we need to make sure that we keep the separation of the 2 functions really clear, because otherwise I think we will get ourselves into all sorts of trouble down the line. So I'm holding really strong the concept that planning stands slightly apart and independent from anything which the council as a landlord would enact. But the key thing through all of this is transparency.
Batteries gone. Sorry, if I could just respond. The decision making of planning is of course nothing to do with the executive and is entirely separate. The making of policies such as DPOs would be entirely an executive responsibility. That's an enormous gap. So there isn't a conflation of those 2 things here. What I was suggesting was that in setting out some instructions to the professionals, we should indicate that right at the very front of the process and running continuously during the process should be this triaging process, which tries to make sure you're on the correct disposal strategy. And I don't hear anything that has given me a particular concern about that. It's just that this is the written document, so this is what the officers start from. And I was suggesting that the process which has been explained to me wasn't really coming through on page 19 of the document.
So I think there's probably some feedback that we take there just to make sure we understand this right, Councillor C, around being clearer in the documentation when it goes through to Scrutiny Committee about that kind of triaging role, which I think is the asset management group, really. But we could probably flesh that out a bit more, and my colleagues write that down. So thank you.
Thank you. I've got a number of councillors have indicated. Councillors Locke, Hobhouse, and then Collins. So Councillor Locke.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just want to come back and follow on from the first question we had. It would be very interesting to know how many properties do get sold under the market value, and especially where, if we still have them count farmers and what have you, when they're occupied by tenants and what, because over the past I feel that possibly, we've sort of sold ourselves short, and I'm sort of heartened with what the executive member Ross has just said about the number of people who are going to be involved with making the decisions. It's not going to be made just by one person, as I feel that this is possibly where it's possibly fallen down in the past. But I would as the first question said, first questioner said, it would be nice to know the value of properties which do, irrespective of the policy, get sold under value and for what reasons. Thank you.
I think to actually give you a list and some more detail on that, we'll have to take that away and see if we can find out that information. Going forward, we have a clear process that we can demonstrate that, but it's a bit more difficult to collate the data from previous years when the 5 councils were separate.
I appreciate that, but that could have an effect on your policy moving forward. Do we need to change it? Yeah. Bob knows where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Whether you want to comment?
I suppose just to point out, I mean, we are taking a very blank piece of paper approach to this now. So whilst we have obviously looked at the 5 councils' best policies, I think having looked at them, we thought none of them were much good. I think speaking as the former county council head of property, you know, I absolutely recognise that there was and the lead member has also given us a strong steer that things needed to be different with this approach. So we've taken that on board. So yeah, it is a completely fresh look at this.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm heartened with what we hear there. As I say, the three-member approach, which Ross mentioned, it was important. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hobart.
My question's been answered. I just want to reinforce what it was, which is that we've no longer got a governance body. 1 person, we have a governance body of 3 people. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Collins.
Yeah, Councillor Shane Collins. First question, if you could just confirm that any assets coming up for sale, the ward division councillor will be notified. Yep, thank you. Second question, looking ahead a decade or two, we are facing more expensive food, undoubtedly food shortages. It's good to hear that county farms are included. Is it? I think, if I understand right, county farms are included in this. I would just like to put in an advert really for smallholders and for community gardens and get confirmation that that sort of local food production will enable those people to buy at below the commercial value. I.e., sort of, yeah, it's not about community use, but it's about local resilience.
So the first question was about local members being informed, and absolutely we want to do that at an earlier stage. We recognise the importance of getting that right, so that will be built into the policy. There are occasions when we need to emphasise commercial confidentiality there, because I think some of these sales have, a high value to the taxpayer in Somerset that we need to safeguard, and commercial confidentiality frequently comes into that. So there will sometimes be a need to have those conversations with local members in a private, confidential way. I think there is just one sort of very minor exception, is where we are thinking through on what we call small sites, and these could be very small strips of land, or tidying up of historic errors on boundary issues, that sort of thing. It still comes under a disposal policy, but it is very, very minor and insignificant. And I think there are circumstances there, Councillor Collins, where we would just get on with it as officers. But we're looking at, there is a process that we will go through in conjunction with asset management, just to really check that there's not, our view as officers is that there is no political sensitivity to this square metre of land being tidied up in this way or that way. But there will be those sorts of disposals we wouldn't generally engage local members in, because they're immaterial, really. The second point about small holdings, I mean, we get requests for sort of community asset transfers, or requests to purchase land at undervalue through from those sorts of enterprises. We get other requests from all sorts of other fantastic bodies, food banks, lots of third sector charities that are out there doing fantastic work. And of course, the council is very often on our strategic interests to sort of look at these. That's why we have the ability to sell at undervalue. But all of those requests have to be governed under a policy. Sometimes they will fall under a community asset transfer policy when you're looking at a transfer that meets those terms to a town or parish or a third sector organisation. Sometimes it's about a disposal, but it's undervalue. And I think we just have to take each case on its merits. There are so many different wide-ranging objectives that the council is trying to achieve that we wouldn't want to sort of highlight food production as one objective above community energy companies, for example, above food banks. I just think the policy context of the council will change. So I think we will probably remain silent on that specific point in the policy, but the process is absolutely there to cater for those sorts of things and to make decisions on a case by case basis.
Councillor White.
Just to pick up the point about county farms, we will be having a separate policy on that. It is something which is subject to all sorts of tenancy laws and rules, regulations. But as we have said as administration quite clearly, we want to keep the farm estate. That doesn't mean that any individual piece of land or building is sacrosanct. It's the concept that we want to make sure that we have starter farms, and we need to recognise that we do have lifelong tenants as well. So the farm policy will be a separate document, which you'll see in due course.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, I've just got a question. I don't think it's on policy as much as communication in your report, and that's on the smaller disposal sites. It's quite clear that on the larger ones, the scrutiny is there, the oversight is there. I just want to make sure that you make it clear that there is at least oversight with the officers making decisions on the smaller sites.
Yes, the small sites, we have a list that we circulate to the asset management group members, even in between meetings. So that list of small sites is always there. It's a two-stage process. We declare them surplus, and then the comments are, can come in from asset management group members, the three executive members that are on that group. And they can feed back if there's likely to be any sensitivity about those small sites. So there is that engagement. We don't just go off and sell over sites.
Mike.
Just to reconfirm, if you look at page 22 of the pact and the last slide, it says quite clearly small sites under 50,000 disposed of under officer delegation unless the lead member or local members consultation brings up something on that when it's appropriate. But the asset management group will have this overarching governance.
Thank you. Just to be clear on that then, so the local member will still be consulted on those, because I know from experience that sometimes what appears to be a very small insignificant site locally can be very, very contentious. So just to confirm, if you could confirm what position is on that, thank you.
Yes, sure. The local member will be notified rather than consulted, and it will be on any site which the members of the AMG feel there is a local member consideration. And if you look at this the slide, it says potential ransom value, strategic value, political sensitivity, community impact. So we've got a framework against which we're, as members of the AMG, having oversight, and we'll say, yes, that needs to go out. But can I just say that this is quite a volume of small ones. I saw it at the smallest district council, how many sites we were putting through, and now we're going to have the whole of the county. We need to be mindful, but at the same time, we need to get these things moved at pace.
Thank you. Councillor Trimble.
And thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of points. Firstly, I suppose I'd be interested to know the scale of the size of these properties, you know, how many there actually are. I presume that there'll be a list that goes to the group that are working on this, but obviously if you're not on that group, will we be given that information so that we know the size of the just the sheer number of properties or assets that we're looking at? And yeah, so if I can ask that first.
So we maintain what we call a pipeline document of assets that have been declared surplus and that therefore we are looking to sell. Sometimes things come back off that list, but generally speaking, that's a list of sites that we're disposing of, and we are now running a consolidated list across the new council. It's another question that we'll have to take back as to sort of exactly how many sites there are on that, but we can clarify that. I think again, you know, how the scrutiny committee engages with that list, rather than just the decision reports, is something that I think we're really keen to discuss with the task and finish group, because that's where the balance comes of. And you know, things can sit on that list for years and years and years. I think that's another part of the problem, is that you know, when sales are subject to planning, or we're looking at a sort of a development agreement, or an option that was signed sort of 5 or 6 years ago that is now being exercised, where the council has no, you know, it is legally bound to having entered into an option agreement sometimes many years ago to proceed with the disposal. You're sometimes the decision can be to actually enact a disposal can be many, many years after the sort of legal commitment was created and things like that. So it's kind of handling that. So I think, you know, I think that's probably, if Chair agrees, a matter for the task and finish group to consider, and then develop a process where the committee is engaged.
Councillor White.
I think we also need to recognise, and I'm sure you do, that when all the departments of the council say, no, we don't need this, and we're saying, yes, it's ready for disposal, we also need to be commercially a little savvy on this about, okay, what else is around it? Is there a marriage value? Is there something where we want to, I think as Councillor Sieb indicated, we need to think about what we're going to create in terms of a package before we put it to the marketplace. So even a list of things we don't want, in essence, because they're no longer required, is commercially quite sensitive, and we just need to think about how we talk about these things, because the last thing you want, if you're in the broader marketplace, is to set hairs running on a particular property or interest in some wider picture. And it shouldn't be underestimated that property is a long-term process. It isn't a sort of, okay, we no longer need to step home, but actually we need to think about longer term, and things do come off the disposal lists as well. And as we as a council, I think we all recognise, are going through quite a significant change at the moment. And we recognise that it's not just about traditional bits of property, we're also looking at our office buildings, tenants are also changing, the commercial environment's changing. So it is a very moving feast in that respect. So I think it's going to be interesting how we can engage with scrutiny, but at the same time be mindful that we need to have a responsibility around property for the benefit of the whole of Somerset.
Thank you. Councillor Trimble.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I do understand that, entirely understand that, but obviously, perhaps for some of us, we might not appreciate just how much the council does have to dispose of or not. And so I suppose that's where I was coming from, but I do understand that there's a sensitivity around that.
If I just say for transparency, but online, you can see that our land agreements, they're actually very clear and very transparent, and anyone can see that what is our designation of that particular piece of land is probably commercially more sensitive, but the overall holding is very clearly available online for all members and indeed the public.
Sorry, I still wanted to come back if that was okay.
If I might, Councillor Trim, just say if that information could be maybe passed through to the Democratic Services so it can be circulated amongst members, just so it's just to highlight to members where they can find that, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll send the links through so they can be circulated, but there are a separate land registers for each legacy council at the moment. They're updated annually, so when we get to that point in the year, we'll produce a single consolidated version, and they're always up there.
Thank you. Councillor General.
I wanted to know as well whether we're in a position where we need to shift property or things that we own because of our financial situation. And if that's the case, are we more likely to see more going for less than the market value in order to move it? And also, will we look at properties? Last month we spoke about energy efficiency in some of our estate. Would we be looking to move on those that we feel that we can't afford to bring up?
That would be part of the asset management plan envisages reviewing all of the property, and all of those factors would be considered, and that would be just good estate management, to be frank, that we would look at properties that are a surplus, and then we would weigh up the costs of holding those properties or the benefits of selling them. So it's all factored into the appraisal of each particular property and each particular site. So there wouldn't be a fire sale because of the financial situation. Absolutely, we were under a duty to get best value, and the best value will change from time to time as the market changes, but we're not selling the family silver.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've not got anyone else in the room who's indicated, but I have, I believe we've got Councillor Osborne online. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. Forgive me for keeping my mic off, but my broadband here is dreadful and it will break up. I was just really going to comment on some of the bits that Tony Locke raised and also Shane Collins. With farm disposals, which I know it is a very clear commitment you're not going to do, but you are tied with legislation. The old Agricultural Holdings Act means that the tenants are entitled to purchase at a discount of, I believe it's around 30%, and there's nothing you can do about that. The farm business holdings, which I think are now in the majority, it's at full market value, but you do put uplifts on those of up to 50 years. Shane raised the issue of small holdings. Well, around 2017, you did do a task and finish. I wasn't involved in that, and I wasn't actually even permitted to provide evidence. But one of the things that was suggested was the letting of small parcels of land almost as starters. I think it was anything from 2 acres to maybe 24, just as starters, and that sort of was mooted at the time. I remember seeing the paperwork. It's around 2017 if you look back, and that may be the basis for sort of coming up and addressing some of those requests from community groups and from others, because there was a feeling that smaller acreage is also more suitable for horticultural as well. And we didn't necessarily cater for people who might want to make a start in the horticultural sector. That's all I would comment on that. But we are covered by uplift clauses, and for interest, that is around 50 years. If you are going to do any work on a revised county farms policy, I know I haven't looked at it since 2018, but I would be happy to join a task and finish on that. And as Ilminster Division actually holds a significant amount of the county farm estate, I do feel there should be input at that stage from the division members, which is myself and Val Keach.
Thank you very much. cancellation you indicated, and then I'll come to Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Chair, that I remember that well from 2017. I always thought there was a real weakness in that, actually, that there is very little land use that doesn't need a building of some sort, even if it's just for storage of seed and crops, animals, vehicles, expensive equipment. And so I thought at the time, the task and finish group then kind of missed a trick that actually a small site, whilst the land is of great use, it actually is not a great deal of help to people without some form of building. And I think whatever is looked at for the future, we need to bear that in mind, how people always have used land. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Again,
Yeah, can I?
Just one moment, Councillor Osborne, if Mr. Williams comes back, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
So just in answer to your questions, Councillor Osborne, the first point on the kind of tenancy restrictions and agricultural tenancies and things like that. So a valuer will, so when we talk about sales at undervalue, the nature of a tenancy will affect the market value of it. So you know, that's sort of taken into account in the evaluation of particular tenancy terms and restrictions on what we can do and what any future purchaser might be able to do. So it's just a sort of technical point, really. I think I wanted to make the point, so there was a long time ago under the former county council a task and finish group on county farms. This is a new council, it's a new administration, there's a new manifesto, and there's, you know, as an officer group, we are taking another sort of blank sheet of paper approach to this. There's only so many blank sheets of paper you can fill in at one time, and that's been a real challenge in this transition period for officers and the executive. But when there is a clear commitment, when we have the time. Once we've done this disposal policy, there will be both a discussion on community asset transfers, because that's a really important area to get a new policy framework set in stone, and also taking the steer from the manifesto, a sort of policy on the council's rural estate. So there is commitment to do that, and I just wanted to make the point that that will be a fresh look. And obviously we will review what happened in 2017, but I think in the context that's historic.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne, and then we'll draw this section to a close.
Yeah. Can I just add to that I certainly recall, and I do agree with Liz, that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that policy, was bare land isn't that much help, and how you're going to deal with the issue that people will want to put, as you say, storage facilities on there. That was a practical consideration, but nevertheless it may well be worth revisiting going forward to meet that need, particularly for the horticultural sector, and to look at and to address. We're clearly getting requests. I know there's one from Green Ilminster, for example, for parts of the estate for community use. And as I say, I would be more than happy to be involved in any task and finish looking at the policy for the rural estates. The other question I have, Bob, is Councillor Filmer, sorry, is how many properties have we had that have got a community, where a community asset right to bid value has been placed upon them? I'm aware of a couple in Ilminster alone. And is there a link so councillors can just keep an eye on what is coming onto that register, because clearly that will have an impact on disposals as well in terms of speed.
Thank you. Do officers have that information here, or is that something you will provide after the meeting?
We'll provide that information afterwards.
Okay, so we'll get that circulated and make sure it's made available to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Councillor Filmer.
Thank you very much. Okay, so just a very brief summary of it. As far as the comments have been made, I think it's been highlighted by members that obviously, if we are looking at disposals, we need to make sure that we're looking at getting best value. Best value doesn't always necessarily equate to purely financial. There are other values to assets, and those obviously are things that members have highlighted that need to be taken into account. The comment was made early on about looking at strategic need of assets across the county. One of the comments I would like maybe to draw attention to on page 18, which I think it refers to sustainable, efficient and effective the estate. One thing we need to take into account is the accessibility and the democratic element of we are a large county, and the location of assets is important as well as their financial value. It was one of the concerns that was always raised through the unitary, was that it didn't become a county based in one particular area, and that's something that's going to have to be worked on as we move forward. Issues have been raised about balancing the sort of corporate benefit to the council against the local benefit to communities, and that again is something that will need to be based in the issue. I think it was very useful that we've heard that the member involvement is being stepped up, and I think that is important. And officers, with all things council, officers advise, and ultimately members will have to decide. So I think we all understand the knowledge that officers bring, but ultimately decisions sit with members, and members are the ones held accountable for those decisions going forward. So we need to make sure that's well understood. And on the county farms, we've heard obviously there's going to be development work done forward, and I'm sure once that development work is done, it will be scrutinised, whether it's this committee or other committees, I don't know, but I'm sure it will. So it is, and I have to put my hands up at this point. I was one of the members of the working party that was referred to, so it wasn't necessarily perfect, but it was trying to address the issues at that time. And as you say, the world has moved on. We now need to look at it again. So we'll be very interested to see how that comes back. Thank you all very much for your input on that item. It takes us to the next one, which is actually very much related. Property rationalisation, and Mr. Williams, again, it's in your remit. Do any of the councillors want to introduce it, or is it straight to Mr. Williams?
Councillor White may want to say a few words, and it will buy time to my colleague Sarah Kelly to set herself up, and Sarah's going to do the presentation.
So as I say, if we move on to item 6, which is the property rationalisation item.
Okay, thank you for this. As you know, and we're in one of the many buildings the council has inherited from the former district councils, and alongside a considerable number of other assets already held. It's going to be quite a long process. We're in a very changing environment in terms of where people work and where people go to work in the future. However, we have kicked off a programme, and I'll leave the officer to explain the details, but it's not something we are sitting still on. We recognise that holding property takes cost, it carries risk, whatever, and also we need to actually give certainty where possible to our members of staff and to the local community. So with that, I'll hand over to Ollie Woodhams, who will explain the broader principles of where we're going with this rationalisation.
Thank you. And also, Ollie, just Mr. Robbins, just before you come in, for those who are following this online, potentially, there was a supplemental agenda item that was circulated to members. So if you're following this through the ModGov, it's not in the agenda pack. It's on one of the supplemental documents. So it just a bit of flicking between. But if I can pass them to the officers, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll pass over to Sarah, who will go through the presentation shortly. But just to say, echo Councillor White's points, this is going to be a really, really big piece of work. And I think big in every sense of the word. There's a lot of work to do. It has a very profound impact on the kind of authority we will be, how we will work, and there is a lot we need to consider in terms of the sort of objectives we're trying to achieve. This really is the starting point for a discussion that we definitely expect to come back to this committee on this item in the future. we have some sort of, we're starting with some stuff that's in flight that Zara will go through, that we might bring back fairly soon, but there will be much bigger questions that we need to debate here. And I think it's, what we're presenting now is an overview, really.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Kelly and I am Programme Manager for Property Rationalisation. This is working with Ollie in the Strategic Asset Management Department. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to go through a few slides with you today, and largely we're going to cover a brief background of the programme. So, you know, why are we here? What are the kind of things we're looking at? The governance that we've agreed for the programme, and I'll give you some updates on early kind of first phase projects that, as Ollie suggested, are already in flight. And what we're particularly interested in is really for the committee to lead us on at what stage you would like us to come forward in future to provide further updates. I think that's of interest to Ollie and myself, so we can probably come back to that at the end. Can we have the next slide, please? So just by way of brief background, I think we all know that the kind of post-COVID working styles, coupled with the merge of the 5 authorities, has meant that we do have an oversupply of office accommodation. And to that end, the LGR Programme Board in November of last year endorsed the establishment of this property rationalisation programme. And we're initially focusing on those kind of office and customer service sites, but encompassing everywhere where we have operational property requirements for the new council. I think Ollie alluded to it, it is a complex programme, and so we are having to break it down into manageable phases. We have identified the kind of opportunities that form phase 1, and I will take you through some updates on those projects very shortly. Phase 1 also includes a One Public Estate shared accommodation review, and we're working very closely with our One Public Estate partners, particularly the NHS and the police, to look to see whether we can identify opportunities for joined up property solutions to support better delivery of that One Public Estate. And picking up on a kind of conversation that you had on the last agenda item, we are very much looking at an evidence-based decision-making approach to this work. So we're not just looking at where are our properties and where are our staff, we are also looking at what are the conditions of those properties, what are the future maintenance liabilities, decarbonisation potential and costs to support obviously our climate pledge. So there's a lot of information that we gather that will inform the decision-making for this piece of work to make sure that it is a fully evidence-based approach. Have the next slide, please. The property rationalisation programme will support delivery of the objectives that are contained in the property asset management strategy and plan, and that plan was approved by full council in February of this year. And we've mentioned the asset management group again on the previous agenda item, and that group will kind of oversee the implementation of that strategy and plan. So we'll very much be feeding into that group as we progress with this programme. Next slide, please. So in terms of governance, I've got 2 governance slides to show you quickly. And what I'm aiming to do here really is just hopefully emphasise that we have got a robust governance process to support our decision making and governance of this programme. At project level, we will have officer working groups for each individual project within the programme. At programme level, we've got Ollie as the senior responsible officer and myself as programme manager. And then at board level for the overall programme, it's the transition, transformation and change board. So we will be reporting to them. And in fact, we're scheduled to meet with them later this month. And obviously at executive level, we're working very closely with Mike as lead member for economy planning and assets. There will be a number of groups and forums that we link in with, both for advice, information, technical support. That is our asset management forum, which is an internal strategic asset management group. We've got the asset management group itself at executive level, and obviously this committee themselves. So we will be linking in as and when required to get that input and kind of guidance. Next slide, please. In terms of the One Public Estate work that I mentioned previously, so we have stepped up a project that I'll talk about shortly. Kind of similar governance really, but just different makeup. So at project level, the working group will be made up of representatives from Somerset Council, the ICB, Primary Care, Somerset Foundation Trust and Avon and Somerset Police. We've already established that group. We've already had early conversations and we're sort of quite enthused that that's going well. At programme level, again, it's myself as programme manager, and we have consultancy support that we've engaged here using some One Public Estate funding. And that's a company called Montague Evans, who are experienced in delivering one public estate projects. So they will be supporting us quite closely with this piece of work. And at programme board level and in terms of senior responsible officers, we are utilising the ICS Estates group because many of the people that need to be represented already sat on that group. So to prevent duplication and kind of calendar challenges, we will be using that group, and the police will be invited along, and we'll have a standard agenda item each time to discuss our one public estate agenda. In terms of oversight and engagement and to help us agree the strategic objectives, we will also have access to the ICS Collaboration Forum and Somerset Board. So that's all been agreed. And I think it's just important to mention in terms of the one public estate governance, each kind of authority, each organisation will have to follow their own governance and decision-making processes. So there will be times in that programme where we will have to pause for everybody to go to their respective organisations and keep them updated and informed and seek decisions. Next slide, please. I'm just going to move on quickly and provide you with some updates on the specific projects that are included at the moment within phase one. We have a project that's well established in Yeovil, looking at Petter's House and Yeovil Library. Petter's House was an ex-SSDC building and it was home to the kind of customer services and housing teams. It is, according to Google Maps, about 110 yards from Yeovil Library. And we feel it gives us an opportunity to look to relocate our customer services into the library in order to provide a single customer service delivery point in Yeovil Town Centre. At the moment, customers are going to two sites in very close proximity for two different services, and that seems silly. We have recently completed a decarbonisation scheme at Yeovil Library, whereas Petter's House hasn't been decarbonised. Again, when looking at what site do we go to, we've very much considered that kind of long-term future maintenance liability and obligations. If the feasibility study proves viable, we would look to declare Petter's House as surplus, and then that would go through the policies that my colleagues have previously spoken to you about. We have undertaken detailed engagement with services already on this particular project, and we have appointed space planning consultants who are already at draft design stage. So we're kind of in the process of reviewing those designs, communicating with services, with key members, and the next stage would be really to start moving towards costings there. So we are still at feasibility stage, but I think it's fair to say we're at quite an advanced stage with that piece of work. We also have C Block at County Hall. I'm sure many of you will be familiar that C Block has been empty for some time, and we are progressing with the vacation of that block. We still use 2 floors, but really for storage purposes, and we are looking to kind of move that and to understand how we could sever C Block from the remaining campus. We have appointed Alder King to assist us with looking at marketing options for the site, and we are in active dialogue with interested parties, and those dialogues will continue. It's a challenge, but we're hopeful we're progressing in the right direction. Next slide, please. We have got an extensive review ongoing in the West Somerset area, and by West Somerset, I'm referring specifically to Minehead and Willerton, where we have 10 properties in reasonably close proximity. Of those 10 sites, 3 are depot sites, and we will need to review those separately as part of a wider project looking at all the depot sites across the county. And that will obviously be in collaboration with colleagues from highways, waste, fleet, grounds maintenance, etc. We also have a couple of properties that we consider are fully optimised, and they will be retained as is. And they are properties that offer very good community facilities already, such as children's nursery and various charitable organisations. So there are a couple of properties that we've already considered as being fine to leave as they are. We have a property in Minehead called the Seahorse Centre. It has been vacant since 2021, and we've had significant interest, and we're at advanced stages of negotiation to sell that property to Avon and Somerset Police. They would like to use it to house an inquiry office, a neighbourhood policing team, and their response officers. As part of that deal, there would be a partial lease back to Somerset Council for us to deliver the satellite site for the LUF funded Somerset Academy for Health and Social Care Training that I believe you're aware of as a committee. So those negotiations are ongoing, but again, we believe are progressing well. We also have 4 properties in Willerton, and 3 of those are actually on one street. You know, the front doors literally look at one another. We have undertaken a lot of data gathering for each of these 4 properties, and we think we're at the point where we have 2 options that we're currently considering and undertaking further detailed feasibility into. One of those options is to retain West Somerset House, which is the ex-Somerset Western Taunton property, and declare the other 3 sites, which are a children's centre, library and Beckett House, surplus to requirements, and move those services into West Somerset House. So West Somerset House is significantly underutilised. It's the picture that's at the bottom of your screens. And we are confident that it is large enough to fit all of those other services into that building. So it would mean being able to declare 3 other properties surplus. We're undergoing feasibility at the moment to see whether we could adequately provide soundproofing, because it would be a range of services in there, and at the moment it's a very, very, very open plan building. So we're just looking at the costs of that and whether that then proves viable. The second option is almost the flip side of that, to dispose of West Somerset House and retain the other 3 properties. It's obviously not an optimum solution in terms of we're then managing 3 sites instead of 1. So we're looking into those, we're continuing the feasibility, and we hope to be sort of finalising that feasibility and looking to identify a preferred option really within the next couple of months. So all very positive. Next slide, please. This is actually my last slide. So just a brief update on the One Public Estate shared accommodation review that I mentioned earlier. So as I referred to, we have appointed Montague Evans to support us with a strategic review. We've had a launch meeting and actually a further ICS estate meeting yesterday. And we've also identified additional stakeholders who we would like to engage with this piece of work, and that will be people from the blue light services, so you know, ambulance, fire. It could be like probation services, and particularly the voluntary and community sector. We need to make sure they're engaged with this piece of work. We're at the stage really of agreeing our in-scope properties for this review. Once we can't consider everything, the focus largely is on non-clinical, non-operational spaces. And so what we're doing is identifying those in-scope properties and gathering a lot of data. So all the stuff we've talked about before, what are the conditions, what lease requirements have we got there, or lease conditions. And then beyond that, we'll move on to next steps and trying to kind of come up with a plan of action there really. And the idea is we'll produce a strategy from this piece of work, and that will then have to be delivered. So it's a long-term piece of work. That's it for me, but it would be interesting, as I said, to particularly hear comments on how people might want us to engage in future.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from members, please? Yeah, Councillor Criminal.
This is my only opportunity to ever say this to me, so I just wanted to take my opportunity. Regarding Petters Way, when it came to looking at the 2 district council sites that were there, I wonder why Petters Way was the one that was decided to, or that you decided was the best one to sell on. Only because I can't help feeling all the money that's gone into the regeneration and things, had we brought all the staff into town, all of those who are working on site, to work in the town centre, then we would have had that footfall into the town, and it would have been supporting the town centre, whereas that industrial estate, most people have to access by car. I know there's a bus stop, but it's about a 6-minute walk. And I just wondered what the rationalisation was behind that, please.
So I think the first thing to say is that we haven't made a decision. We haven't declared that property surplus yet, and there's some thinking and checking to do, both on whether there's a technical issue around where our infrastructure communications routes go, and we need to overcome that. It's quite tricky, and there's also that stopping and thinking. I think, could we have our Yeovil office space in Petters House in the town centre? I think that still leaves us with, the direction of travel on looking at integrating customer services within the Yeovil Library, and all the space planning work that's been done on that is still a perfectly valid piece of work under either option. But yeah, to reassure you, we haven't made the decision and ruled out whether we could use Petters Way as a town centre office space. I think our our thinking as an officer team is that they're probably not going to be viable to use that site as an office space for Yeovil. And I think, you know, we're working on the assumption that we are going to need to continue to have, as a wider unitary council, some sort of office presence in our major towns, including Yeovil. And it would be great, wouldn't it, to have those in town centres and support regeneration. And the challenge with Yeovil is, you know, Brinton Way is obviously much larger than Petters Way. It is, you know, it's very underutilised as well at the moment, but we have, you know, the area delivery teams, social care workforce, housing, planning, so on and so forth, plus a need to support a hybrid way of working that works for our workforce, having come together as authorities. And I think it's going to be a challenge just to fit that number of people into Petters House, and also it is not an, you know, it's not an optimized building. It's not there would need to be the utilisation of space isn't great in Petters House, and it has a huge sort of ongoing maintenance liability looking ahead into the future. So there are questions to answer about that. And the other thing about Yeovil is, of course, through this one public estate work, we are thinking alongside the police and our NHS partners about how we might use the public estate together. And that's really, you know, and the ICB in particular have an office space in Yeovil. And we, you know, we will take decisions like that together. And I think once you start to sort of look at that, it becomes less likely that Petters Way is the right solution. What I would say is, you know, absolutely, it doesn't mean that a relocation into the town centre at some point in the future, we're not ruling that out at all. It's just that we're not sure whether Petters Way is the right building, and that's the decision we've got to take. But you make a really good point. We do need to just stop and think. I think once the feasibility work's been done.
Councillor White.
I would also add that there is an ongoing programme within communities to actually consolidate customer contact points in each of the towns, so that we can use the libraries more effectively as a hub for community contact. And that is a programme you probably won't have seen here, but this is in response to that the libraries become a wider role than just the traditional role of the library. So this first part of the project is very much working with our community colleagues in response to them wanting to have a single contact point. And then that also then frees up the building to allow us to have those broader discussions. And this is the issue with this programme. It is remarkably complicated. It is overlapping, and it's almost a chicken and egg situation. What elements do you look at first before other ones? And you've got to make sure that decisions anywhere down the line, do they not only make sense now, but do they compromise decisions to be made in the future? So using external consultants, Sally with the team, and also with our One Estate partners, are doing a major thinking exercise, stopping and considering every potential option. But it is a real challenge, and it's one which we're doing against a changing backlog. You can't stop but read the press every day and see other organisations saying we want to have staff in, or we're quite happy to work with remote working. That each of the councils we've inherited the staff. For instance, I come from Mendip, and we've had a hot desk policy for a long time where staff are used to coming in, but not every day. And the other councils have other former council buildings have been used in workplace. So this is something you're going to hear a lot about, but it's got to be done in some sort of staged and managed way.
Thank you. Councillor Trimnell.
Sorry, I mean, I totally understand about the library, and that's fine. I suppose it's just that sort of logical trying to get everything into that one place, and you've got to pick one or the other. And I look at Brinton Way as being so cut off, so away from everything, unless you wanted some plywood or, you know, your windscreen repaired. Getting into town and being able to have those staff members, etc., parking in town, doing the work that they need to do, using the shops and the local facilities. I think it's something that I'm glad that it's not a done deal, but it really, I know it's not the only consideration, but we do need to look at everything holistically and how different systems and workplaces can support one another. So who will members be involved in any of the decision making on this?
Yeah, absolutely. The decision on that relocation and any disposal decision for Peter's House would be a member decision. Regardless of the financial threshold, I think it falls into that level of things that are sensitive and important enough to be a member decision. And I think one of the questions we're here to answer is, how many of these decisions this committee like to get involved in detail, and ultimately Councillor Fillmore is the sort of gatekeeper for that. I think we have a really difficult task here as an officer group, as Councillor White sort of alluded to. On the one hand, you don't want to take decisions on individual sites in isolation because you might cut off options, and I would emphasise to try and provide some reassurance, because our strategic asset management strategy has a clear objective for our assets to support economic regeneration, and it says in there locating properties in the town centre is an important part of that, to encourage footfall, to use our worker presence to drive footfall to the town centre. So that strategic context is there. Whether Peter's House is the right solution for that or not, something I've covered already, but there's also the issue of we could sort of leave everything underutilised and in some cases vacant until we've got a totally joined up master plan with our public partners and we know exactly what the right answer is for our workforce, and then we move to that solution in one go and then we get it right. And in some ways that's what you want to do. We also have a financial imperative to try and release surplus assets. We're in the situation where 6 months after vesting day, we've still got separate teams working in separate offices, in some cases in the same locality, and there's a need, and we're heating all this space, so and we're paying business rates on all this space. So I think whilst we might there's a balance to be struck there between sort of looking at individual disposals on a case by case basis to try to reduce that underutilisation quicker and save money and release receipts, and getting it absolutely right in a strategic context. I think Pesterway is a really good example of that. Do we move now, or do we just hold it back, acknowledging that that's going to come at quite a significant cost at a time when we're really financially challenged?
That's all right.
Thank you. Obviously, Ollie's talking from an asset point of view. I also have another hat, and that is economic regeneration, as part of our overall view. And that means that Yeovil, at the moment, we know we're working through the Yeovil refresh, which is really just about the public estate, the public realm at the moment. But actually we need a much broader discussion, and one which is beginning to be thought about how we actually take the broader picture. I must admit, I was very surprised that I didn't inherit master plans for each of the towns. And I think we do need to do that work, and that's not cheap work, and it's not going to be done quickly. But whatever we do in Yeovil, we need to look at it holistically, not just from an asset point of view, but also from a regeneration point of view, and also the in-flight projects like the overall refresh, which needs to be considered. So it is a juggling act, but I can assure you that local Yeovil members will be invited to a forum, workshop, whatever we want, to start talking about some of the longer term issues, and that will come from the regeneration team. But obviously the asset officers will be involved in that too. It is a jigsaw we're trying to put together, and it's not one which is readily, obviously, an easy solution on this, but it is on the agenda, I can assure you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think as with the previous report, obviously it's good for local member involvement. And the earlier you can do it, the better, because then these people are feeding into the process rather than feeling they're coming to it at the end. So if that can be looked at, that'd be good. I've got two speakers who've been looking so far, Councillor Hobhouse and then Councillor Locke. So Councillor Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one question first, and then I'd like to make. Have you got the previous reports about Brinton Way and Petters Way and their inability in both cases to meet carbon future? And the answer is yes or no.
We do have reports. What the estates team have reports, and we're also gathering other condition data as well, so that not just decarb, so future maintenance for each of those sites as well.
Okay, in both cases, they are seriously lacking. Petters Way, sorry, my hope it's still working. Petters Way is the only building in South Somerset with single glazing. It's there we are. We've got the report. It needs major amount of work to just make it habitable. And we tried 3 years ago, 4 years ago to go into the library, and we have problems without being rude to with the county to move in there. We need to abandon Petters Way pretty quickly. To be frank with you, there are also problems with Brinton Way. And funnily enough, it's not the windows or anything simple. It's the metal structure of the building. We had it infrared photographed, and every one of the metal beams is leaking heat in the winter into the environment. And we need, before we make any decisions that are easy, to look at the buildings first from a climate point of view. And I wouldn't mind betting, I only know about South Somerset, but I wouldn't mind betting that most of our council buildings would fail any form of future carbon climate situation. Don't go shake your head, Ross. You only know will mend it. I happen to know South Somerset, and I wouldn't like to even start on this building because I'll bet you it hasn't been infrared photographed at night in October onwards to show you where you're leaking heat. Thank you.
Williams.
Yeah, I come back on the general point of decarbonisation again. Go back to the asset management strategy and plan. One of our objectives, one of the 6 objectives, is to deliver the climate emergency strategy. Make sure we have a long-term strategy to decarbonise our estate. That's a massive challenge, as Councillor Hobhouse points out. A lot of our buildings are a long way from being carbon neutral, and that's a huge cost. But we have made a start, is I think what I would say. And legacy councils have done some work on this, and we have some net zero buildings, including the Oval Library, which has been fully the second public sector decarbonisation scheme to complete in the country, and one that sites were really pleased with. So that is an exemplar site. We've got other operational sites around the county that have been decarbonised, and there's our office estate is at sort of various stages. And rest assured, we brought together through the amalgamation of the legacy council some really clever people who know what they're doing and who have a lot of experience in this stuff in the strategic asset management service. So as well as looking at the historic data, we're using their intelligence and the up-to-date understanding we have from our experience of delivery here to sort of really build that decarbonisation question in. It would cost a lot of money though, and I think that's the big challenge for us as a council. But we've got to make the right solutions in balance with everything else.
Thank you. Councillor Locke.
Thank you. I think you won't be surprised to hear that I'm going to mention about Yeovil as being a Yeovil member. And I got to say that I'm heartened with what the officers have said with regards to Yeovil. And I'm also heartened with what the executive member has also said. But I would implore all to start looking for after the infrastructure side of the refresh is done now, rather than leave it till it is done. And I know you're doing that with Petters House, and I can see all the reasons with the way you're leaning with that. And I will leave it at that at the moment, but I would implore that you, communication is the key word on that. And it would be nice, you know, there's maybe if you did a presentation to the 3 or the 4 local councils involved, parish councils involved in that, with the Petter's House, the library thing, to let things know what is happening there. It would be good, because what the councillor has said for the after the infrastructure, but that is where I am imploring and how you want to handle that, Chairman. But I think it needs to come back to this authority, to this committee rather, for updates. But I would implore that we do not leave for, I'm referring to Yeovil here now, from the reset fresh side of it, for the economic development and building the town centre back up again, which is not very clever at this moment in time, but it's where it is. And it's better to start sooner for after the infrastructure is finished than leave it till the infrastructure is finished and then try and do it. Let's start sooner rather than later. Thank you. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. I think Councillor White wants to comment.
Just to say that, as I alluded to earlier, the regeneration team are planning a forum stroke workshop, which will include the town council, Yeovil Town Council, and I will ask that the asset team also are part of the presentation. I think it's planned for, I think sometime in October, but whatever the case is, we'll make sure that the points being picked up here today will be included, and that will have both current activity but also future plans too.
Yeah, I'm heartened to hear that, but could I ask that that date comes out sooner rather than later? You know, for October, because there's no good sending out a date for a meeting 10 days before. And, you know, it needs to be at least a month to 6 weeks, and to take into consideration the meetings of the local parishes, who are not small parishes, Brimpton, Yeovil without Yeovil Town, and they do have besides their full council meetings, they do have service committee meetings, which is not taken into consideration, which runs a lot of the infrastructure within their areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I will come for one last question if we can, because I've also got someone online who wants to ask as well. So, and we will watch the clock. So, Councillor Trimnall, and then we're going to move on.
It's only a quick one, but I'm very willing to come along to that as a shopper in Yeovil. I regularly shop there at least once a week, possibly. Tony, I don't know whether you're a regular Marks and Spencer's user and a user of all of the shops, but I really am. I really want to see Yeovil succeed. So if there, as a non-local member, if there's any opportunity I could come along, I'd be very willing to.
We all do that, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chilcott, you're online.
Thank you very much, Chair, and an interesting debate. For me, the decarbonisation is a wider one than just the council. And I think if we look at most of our town centres and industrial estates right around Somerset and had our infrared recorders out, I think most of the buildings would actually be letting a lot of heat out. Welcome to come and test Minehead Library, however. That has been decarbonised and I think was one of the biggest losers of heat in all of the estate. The work's been done there and it's much, much better. But it was very costly, very well received, I have to say, but very costly piece of work. So I'm sure there's a programme for that, and as funding comes along, that will improve that. And I know a lot was done on County Hall. And I think the other element in with that is the rentability of a building, in that if you don't do some carbon work, you can't then rent it. So there's a loss of income which might offset carbon work. So I think there's a broader conversation around that carbon decarbonisation. Just to say I've had a look today, and obviously West Somerset and Willerton House is there. We did have a meeting some considerable time ago about that. Haven't had one since, so I wasn't aware of some of the information that's been shared today. Would have been helpful. And I'm also under no illusions. You can put your points of view across as a local member, and you can like or not like something, but the likelihood is that decision will still go ahead. Coming back to footfall, my concern very much is when you start to optimize your buildings and get rid of buildings publicly and to your public, that's seen as a pulling out of an area. And I think there's a delicate balance here. And for me, I'm getting more and more feedback that we are excluding people. We've talked a lot about offices and spaces, but it's our public that needs to use these spaces to access the help and support that we offer as a council. And many are feeling that there is no access. They can't get to speak to someone. From Minehead, it's an hour and a half on a bus to Taunton. If you've got perhaps a housing issue or something similar, and that is not available in our library, even though I was told it probably would be. So there is this joined up piece of work with the asset rationalisation that really must consider our public access as we do it. It's absolutely key. We've still got a lot that don't have access online or telephone, and occasionally when it's really sensitive matters still need to speak to a member of staff. And for me today, I haven't heard enough about that element of the rationalisation. So I just ask what thought has been given to that, please.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Councillor Shilcott. And on your point about, I think you made a number of points that I probably points that we don't need to respond to as officers, but certainly we'll take on board. There was a question about sort of when we're going to come back to that group of local members in West Somerset. We have that in the plan, and Sarah will take that away and be in touch with you to sort of put dates in diaries. We're certainly planning to do that quite soon. I think the point about customer access is a really good one. So I think this is one of the, this is a real opportunity that we've got with the new unitary council to improve our customer access, and I think the strategy at the moment is that libraries are at the heart of that. Our library network is spread further than our office network, and we have rolled out and installed what's called the Attend Anywhere app that libraries and customer and communities colleagues have been doing this work rather than the assets team. But it's a really important context for our asset strategy. So I don't think this has been publicised as well to our customers as it needs to be. I think there is a sort of learning and piloting phase to go through before that happens. But to reassure you, Mandy, that the customer access facilities, in-person customer access, assisted digital transactions, being able to talk to any expert in the council in theory by walking into Minehead Library. We have the technology to do that and the physical space to do that now. I think we just need to make sure that the kind of processes and systems work before it's launched strongly. But please do talk to my colleagues, Jan Stafford and Liz Dawson, about how that's going and how it's going in Minehead for further detail. But the great thing about doing that, of course, is our libraries are open on Saturdays as well. And I think that's a very, as well as the sort of wider distribution of libraries for customer access, you also get that 6-day-a-week presence, which district council and customer service points never had. So that again is part of our thinking as we design rationalisation solutions.
Can I just respond to that? We have a lot of our towns and parishes will have offices around Somerset, and that is where most of our queries are headed at the moment, because there's a person in an office. My local town council have been sending people to the library to try and get help and access there, and they've been told to stop doing it. So I'm just concerned there is a growth of people that need to speak to somebody, and even through the new system in the library, the access point, you cannot get to speak to someone. It just puts you through an automated service that someone should be able to access online. So for me at the moment, there's work to do and it's not working, and there's a rising frustration with it. And I just thought this is a good place to just air that and let everybody know there's more we can do, and I hope we do that, because it's really important that those need help and support aren't digitally excluded, and we have our doors open as a council when needed. Thank you. Not physical doors, a door of some sort that people can get the help and support they need.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just to say, we will take that point back, councillor Chilcott, and just follow up that and be in touch.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. That's all the speakers we've got. So again, thank you very much for the presentation. I think as we've said in both the presentations today, early involvement of local members is important. They can often help avoid the pitfalls that are possibly going to come forward. As has been mentioned, if we're looking at our estate, we have to be looking at future proofing in terms of maintenance, running costs, environmental impact, all of those things that you've highlighted are things that we will look to. I think the comment you made earlier was if we can't necessarily wait for the perfect solution. I think you're probably right. If we try and wait for perfection, we'll never get there. So it's better to get a good solution in place that can start addressing these issues. And as been said by a number of members and officers, I think openness and transparency of this process is going to be key to it being successful, so people understand what's happening and why it's happening, and making sure that people are kept in the loop, both members and members of the public at the really appropriate times. And as was finally said, I think again, it comes back to my comment on the last report, accessibility of services across the county is critical. I think we all appreciate that, and it's going to be an interesting job to work that one out. But thank you very much. I think we've got a good start as to where we are. And I think as was suggested, I think if we can have reports back to us as to how things are moving forward, and then we'll keep that under review as we go forward. But thank you very much. Members, I'm going to suggest we take a short 5-minute comfort break, because that will also allow us to try and replenish some of the batteries around the room, which are going on. So we'll restart again at just after 2:45. So we'll take that 5-minute comfort break from now. Welcome back, everyone. We'll make a start to our next section. If we can turn to your pages on agenda item 7, which is the council business plan, and that's page 5 of the agenda. And Peter, now I'm going to introduce this one. Or do you want to?
Yeah, well, just say a few words.
Do you want to turn your microphone on?
Not.
That's great.
They all work good. Great to be here.
If someone in the room could just check
the volume. Yes, the volume.
Well done, Liz.
Not there yet.
Do you have the Teams meeting as well?
No.
And that's on the Teams meeting?
So if anyone is on the Teams meeting, if you can just check that you've both got the microphone turned off and the speaker turned off on your laptop. And if you want to give it another go,
Okay, how's that? Better.
Yeah,
So
we're there.
we're not going to name and change whoever it was. Thank you very much. You will all remember that in February this year, the council adopted its council plan, which set out the wonderful aspirations and priorities that we have for Somerset. I'm sure everyone has them tattooed on their hearts, as it were, the green and more sustainable Somerset, the healthy and caring Somerset, flourishing and resilient Somerset, and a fairer and ambitious Somerset. And yes, I was reading that. Obviously that's a wonderful document that sets out our vision for Somerset, but once we've got a wonderful and ambitious vision, we have to ask our fantastic officers to deliver it for us. Their response to that is the council business plan, which they are bringing to this committee today for you to have a look at. It is still not it's not in its final version. There's still plenty of opportunity for members to feed into it, both today and over the next few weeks, with a view to it being adopted finished sometime in the autumn. There's not an awful lot for me to say apart from to introduce the team who've been working on this. So to my right, we have Alice Pigton and Paul Harding, and to my left, we have the new service director, Sarah Scrutiny. Sarah Scrutiny, sorry.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Alice Pigton. As Theo said, I'm Strategic Manager for Business Change. And as you can see on page 36, I'm part of the team that have been putting together the business plan. So all co-authors, but just myself and Paul here today, and obviously Sarah on the end here, as our new service director, will be leading on this with us from now on. So essentially, as Theo said, it's not finished yet, and that's quite right. We're here in a policy development guise. I'm hoping that you can play a role, as with all other members, in helping us develop a business plan that really does help us as officers understand what essential, critical, key, strategic, all those other high-level words, activities, things we need to do over the next 1, 3, 5 and beyond years to deliver the council plan and the vision and the priorities. Hopefully on the tables, which later on in the pack, will give you a good idea of how that's emerging, and after workshops with the executive directors and also feedback from officers as well. There will be more consultation, more engagement going on between now and that final sign-off. That's the phase we're kind of moving into now, as well as that drafting of a fuller document, because obviously at the moment what you see is the meat, if you like, the activity that we'll deliver. So a lot of narrative, or a certain amount of narrative, will define why these things are there and how that link is made. So what I hope today is, do you think this is on the right track? Is it saying the kind of things you'd expect communities to expect us to be delivering? But most importantly, what is missing? What might need changing? What isn't right? And what would be really useful, if you've got any thoughts on actually what, it's not a very good term, but what does good look like? Use it far too much perhaps. But what does success look like in these endeavours in the next, again, 1, 3, 5 and beyond years? What do you think communities need in order to deliver the things we say we're going to deliver? If we go to the next slide, please. Forgive me, I don't think it's actually running the, yeah, thank you. I mean, why do we need one? Because I know there's always the challenge with, well, you know, another document, what's the point? Not all authorities do them, and many local authorities do them, call them different things, not call them a council plan, leave it at that, like we've got with our council plan, but they might call it a work plan or council strategy or something like that. Essentially, it links up what we as individual teams and officers do with what the vision of the authority is. It's also pretty clear that it understands that we can't do everything as an authority. We can't do everything at once. So we obviously have to prioritise things that matter most. And which order we need to do, because some things need to happen in order to let other things happen. But again, that's driven very much by the vision, the priorities, and yourselves as members. Critically, I think what it really does do is it holds us to account as officers to do a good job together. I think a really good example has literally come out from Ollie, who sat in this chair a few moments ago, is the assets disposal policy, and indeed asset management generally. It's not about just the bricks and mortar or the piece of the ground, it's about actually what they do. And I wrote down the note that Ollie said, a building about economic development, economic growth. It's also about community development and support potentially. It's about sustainable council. It's also about providing quality, accessible services, and what all those things mean to us as an authority. So it is about bringing us all together to make sure we're delivering those end results that we all collectively wish to achieve. And most importantly, so that you can hold us to account on it. This links directly into how we're going to manage performance in the new authority. It tells us what we're going to do, when, and most importantly, who's going to do it. It also says things that we're going to do a bit later, possibly not even do at all, but there are the debates. It also stresses the point and value of leadership, which I know Duncan's chief exec talked about a lot. Leadership, empowerment, but also accountability. So it is very much about saying, this is what we're about, hold us to account on it as officers. Happy to go to the next slide, please. It's just a nice little diagram, and it shows another awful buzz term, golden thread. Anybody got any better ideas, please do tell us. It essentially says, what are the administration's intentions and members' intentions in terms of policy development? That's the kind of what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. The business plan feeds off of that, and it comes into more detail about actually what is going to get delivered specifically to make that council plan come to life. And then people like me, right hand side, what my employee actions, what my objectives are going to be. How do I participate in this overall piece of work that's called Somerset Council and Somerset? And service improvement plans are what teams do, and they will come later. And those service improvement plans, and it's worth mentioning, that really does lay out what a team will do, including the business as usual, the things we do every day, the making sure we pay our staff, making sure that the ICT help desk works. Those things may not show in the business plan because they are 70 to 80% that we do anyway. Doesn't mean we don't try to make it better. That's what we're here to improve what we do. But as I say, these are the big strategic, big ticket items that we need to make sure we get right. And within there, you'll see in the table in a few moments, we'll talk about transition program, transformation program. That is about the service alignment and the releasing remaining savings from the unitary program, as well as the very large programs of change and improvement we absolutely need to do, whether that's in adults, children's, or other parts of the organisation. And that will follow in the coming months. We can probably jump ahead a couple of slides, if that's okay. I don't want to take too much time. The one that one, there we are. That simply just tells us we've got a lot of strategy, a lot of policy, a lot of lists and statements of things we're going to do. There's work to be done on that because obviously we're bringing 5 legacy councils together. We need to work out actually what is our focus. But what we really wanted to do here was just to let you know that there are things underway, and the business plan will obviously embody and absorb and understand and reflect those. But again, going back to my point about the previous agenda item, how do these things come together to actually all pull and push in the same direction so to get to where we need to go? And again, top right, the council plan priorities. That's lined up there in diagrammatic form to give you a connection. Not what one thing doesn't always do one thing, it does lots of different things. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I won't dwell on the content because I think the last thing you want me to do is read all of this out. But if we jump to the next slide, this is the one that's probably most advanced at the moment. It's about that sustainable authority. So we talk about things like, the medium-term financial plan. So our budget and budgets for the coming years. I've mentioned the transition and these outcomes, which the workshops so far have identified. So we want to be financially sustainable. I imagine that's pretty important. So there it is. Alignment of services. This does need to happen. Otherwise, we will remain with inefficiencies that we can drive out. And we're working on that now, of course. Clearly, we need to develop a culture for the new organisation. And I'm sure you will have heard from Duncan and others about that. Council will have culture, whether we try to have one or whether we don't try to have one, but let's try and have the one we want. So let's focus on that. So that's why that's there. And there's a big push on digital innovation, but obviously with the caveat that not everybody is online, not everybody works best online, not everybody wants to be online. So it's about delivering those outcomes, hopefully tangible things that we can grasp with our friends, families, communities. So actually, this is what we're all about. This is why we get up in the morning. And obviously, over time, things happen. And what does success look and feel like? So not complete. And as you'll see from the following slides, which again I won't dwell on, because hopefully I have an opportunity to review them, and if not before today, then certainly after. This gives you an idea about that kind of flow. And to the left of that table are the council plan priorities. They just don't fit, sadly. So at the top right there, and those little diagrams again. We've got a bit of challenge back on how we were laying this out, and that's perfectly valid, but we just wanted to make sure that you understand that it isn't a new thing we're setting up. And again, this is draft, but hopefully it brings out where we are. So if we could just go through the remainder of the slides to the recent feedback, and I will stop at that point and just stick with the Q&A unless also colleagues have got anything they want to bring in. The recent feedback, I think an important one is to make sure that it doesn't appear like it's shall we say, an up-tier local authority plan. I was just saying the word county. I think that's really important because 5 different authorities, 5 different cultures, 5 different sets of language. We want to make sure that we're using the right language and we're focusing on the right things in this business plan, that it has a role in developing the culture of the organisation and knowing why we get up in the morning, as I say. Environment and climate change, I think we need to boost. I have talked about digital, but that is in there, and you can see some of the other aspects as well, in particular the role of the VCFSE, so the voluntary sector, how we bring those in. And we're really talking to those representatives from that particular part of the universe in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to actually get their take on that, to work out that actually, it's not just about us doing everything, it's about how we work together to do things together. So I think you can see the recent feedback there, and there's been even more since, which is really useful. If we just jump to the timeline, next one and the one after that, please. We're looking to go to executive on 4th of October with here we are, is this where you think we should be, subject to the remaining work we need to do. Then I know there's an MTFP discussion in November. Obviously, that's quite important in terms of what the business plan needs to say. And then we will obviously respond to that and reflect that in the business plan. And then hopefully, I say hopefully, we intend to go to the 6th of December executive for adoption. But obviously we understand that a document's at a point in time, so we look to keep this live, and we're conscious that it's not binding future decisions, but it is something there to have regard to it in what we're here to do, and then we'll review it annually. So that's everything I was going to say. The final slide is really just reiterating the ask of the committee today. I don't know whether they've got anything they want to add, but I'll just thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Members, any comments or questions, please? You'll start with Councillor Trimnell.
Thank you for that presentation. It's quite interesting actually, because you focused on that thread picture. And when I looked at it last night, I had a quick look and I thought, you know, and then moved on. And that's not criticism, by the way. It was probably because it was quite late. But I can see now that it is supposed to run from the council plan, and then moving on to the business plan is how to deliver that. And I suppose my thoughts were last night, my son had a book once and it was the same story written from two perspectives, so two books basically, and I kind of felt it was the same thing. They were going in at the same thing from a different angle, but that would explain that, I suppose. I wondered who gave the feedback that's on page 46. I may have missed a meeting or something, but I wondered where that came from. And I noticed that there's no mention in there when will there be significant change, that some of those are still in development. Will they be ready for the October executive, or are they going to come in for the December? And finally, what are the indicators we're going to measure? So at the moment it says, what does, it's got the term feels like, what does success look or feel like? And I suppose I'm wondering, they sound a little bit sort of vague, and I wondered whether there'll be specific indicators that are measurable that you'll be looking at, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very fair challenge regarding the right-hand side content, and that's what we're populating now. We're having conversations with essentially executive directors and their teams to say, okay, how does this play out? Because we obviously need to understand the realities of it. We also need to work with executive members. Obviously, we'll have a very key role in owning this document. That's not to say that it is not something that we want every single member of the council, every single officer of the council to be taking ownership of, essentially, and then seeing themselves in. Again, that will emerge over the next month as we head into the executive meeting in October. I would be foolish if I said it would all be complete by that point, because you never really know. But what we really do want to do, as you said, is get to that point where there actually is let's call it a target, even if it's not a number one, it's certainly this is how things would look one. In terms of KPIs, so performance indicators, pardon me, and those very specifics, that's where the performance management framework will come in, to actually really define precisely how we are looking to deliver the outcome that we seek. So it's that intermediate step, if you like, between the council plan, which is the vision, this is how we want things to be, and the specifics of, okay, right, is it red, amber, green? Is it improving? Is it not doing as well? But making sure throughout that actually where we are measuring, we're measuring the right things, and where we are having sort of a narrative understanding of how change is happening, that actually we're confident with that as well. That's where that, again, comes to the terminology, that performance management framework. How do we manage and understand and monitor what we do and do something about it? That's the performance management framework. That is one of the suite of documents, which does include the council plan and the business plan and operating model for the authority, to say why we're here, what we're attempting to do, how we're going to go about doing it, and are we doing it properly? Are we getting there? So again, these things are emerging, new authority, a lot of other things going on. But the business plan's a really important one, because what it does is it helps us understand really key critical stuff, alongside the 70-80% that we just do, that we need to be delivering over the next few years. By December, there will be a lot more detail here, if not so in the business plan, but certainly in terms of the overall program of work, all those activities, all those projects that we as an organisation be looking to deliver, which of course, you will see plenty of, because you've got that role as a security committee, and obviously as members both locally in the organisation as well. So the business plan is not the only conduit, but yeah, the diagram, it's useful because it tells us how it translates into individual activity. But we could add extra bits on and bring in the NHS and Somerset Board and other things like that. We just wanted to keep it really clean, just to let you know that council policy, member ambitions, this is how it translates, and this is where the business plan sits. I think I may say about, so I'm not sure. Hopefully I've missed something.
Yeah, you did. It was only on who the feedback came from. So you said also about the fact that you've got the council plan and then the business plan. So it's almost like a series of sort of, excuse the analogy, but Russian dolls, where beneath that will sit individual plans that have more detail. And so I would just ask, who is this plan for? Is this for our residents? Is it for members? Is it for officers? Who is it for?
It's very much, in terms of use, it's very much for officers, for teams, for colleagues. But it's also got value, very great value for you as members to say, are we doing this? Are we on track to deliver what we're going to do? But as I say, it's not the only document, and performance management and the other things that you will see and receive will play a much more detailed role in helping you understand whether the business plan is being achieved. That said, we have no desire for this to be anything other than a publicly available document. We want it to be written in accessible language. We want people to be able to look at it and go, oh, I understand. Hopefully also, sometimes I disagree. I think we should prioritise this rather than it. And that's absolutely how it should be. That's the discourse, isn't it? That's how we talk to one another. And that regular review will be the thing that helps us make sure we keep that up to date.
And the feedback?
It's like I don't want to tell you. We still have fully, because of the timing for publication papers, it's very much from executive members, leaders, associate lead members, and the corporate leadership team. So essentially all the directors, chief executive, and a few other individuals who we've spoken to in the organisation we know will have an interest. Since then, we shared this with all staff and asked for their feedback, and we've got some of it quite challenging, which is really, really good, because that's what we should have. You know, why is this not mentioned? Why is that not mentioned? You really ought to major on this, and that will be fed back into the final documents. We really do want people to be buying into it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Latron, you indicated.
Yeah, sorry, apologies that I'm the other side of the pillar now. I just wanted to, we're always being told don't keep looking back, but I think on this occasion it's quite useful to look at the year, the 11 months really, between the election and vesting day, because as soon as our new then chief executive was appointed, I remember a really interesting conversation that he had with the leader of council, and I was in the room at the same time. And he said normally in a new administration, you would go straight into a full corporate plan. And he made the very good point, can we do that at this time? And Bill Revens, leader of council, and I felt no, we couldn't. A, because there was so much work on the run up to vesting day, and B, because there would be so much developing from the new council post vesting day. So that's when the decision was made to do a council plan, which is really a vision document, although apologies again for jargon. And then that the business plan would come underneath that, and then all the service plans. So, you know, you can think of it as the council plan like a big umbrella and all the others beneath it. But that was the reason that it wasn't all put into one corporate plan at the beginning, that it had to be a staged piece of work because of LGR moved to one new council. And to be honest, I think it's worked. The first council plan is very much based on the manifesto. The business plan is very much about how you deliver that vision. And then the service plans that sit underneath that is how you deliver on every part of the business plan. But I'm delighted that Sarah's here now in the within the executive leadership team, working with Alistair and all colleagues, because I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this is like trying to do a jigsaw and paint the painting that forms the picture of the jigsaw at the same time. It is absolutely massive amount of very complex work. And if we don't get all of those moving parts in the right place at the right time, sitting underneath the council plan and the business plan, then we won't achieve the best council for Somerset. And you know, we all have a collective aim there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If I might, just following up on the comments you've just made, in terms of deliverability, both of the plan itself and then the content of the plan, how do you feel that works with the various pressures, obviously, that are on the council that have been alluded to, in terms of we're a new structure, we've got staff who are obviously having to find their places within that structure, we've got financial issues which we'll discuss later. and the service demands on the council are never diminishing. So how do you feel that we're in a position to both produce the plan and then deliver on that? I don't know who wants to take that. Let's take the mic.
I just love the limelight. Yeah, it's a test and a validation that needs to be done. Is it feasible? It's very difficult with these sorts of documents not to want to put everything in, not just that we are doing or intend to do, but that we'd like to. I think that's good. It's right to be ambitious, but there is that cutting of cloth, and everyone in the room is well aware of the challenges. I suspect very much that an early part of the document will be very clear about the context, the world in which we live, the environment, which sadly we're all having to tolerate and come to terms with, whether that's financial, whether that's to restructure the organisation and delivering those savings that we need to through either the unitary programme remaining or whether it's for MTFP, and also the demand and the world around us that we don't have a huge amount of control over what's going on in different parts of the world, but obviously it has an effect on what happens here. Because that's actually a way of thinking, isn't it? As in terms of whether actually we can do a thing or whether we should do a thing, we should change our mind. Quite a lot of what's in there at the moment is activity that is already agreed to be put into effect. So a really good example is the Education for Life strategy. It's important to write that big and say, this is very important. We are going to make sure we do this, and here's why. But ultimately, it will be about that. Okay, is this feasible? Is this deliverable? And furthermore, as I mentioned, the transition transformation programs, they use a similar process amongst many others as to actually what is within those. What can we do now? What must we do later? So yeah, it's not a someone sits in a darkened room and writes this and says, "Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Can we agree it, please?" And then it's forgotten about because it's utterly unusable. It really does need to be something that partly reflects, but also drives, if you like, in terms of the mindset of us, what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members around the room? Yes, Councillor Rodriguez.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one, really. On your 4th bullet point, which outcomes, it's gone. But anyway, well, whatever it said there, you were saying something about us wanting to track progress. I don't actually know what it said now. But anyways, one of the things that I'd be interested for us to track, keen on to track progress on, is the financially sustainable council outcome, really. I think that's probably the most important one, because without that, you'd probably find it very challenging to deliver much of what's within the council plan. And I'm sure that a lot more detail will come later on in the meeting, finance we don't have to touch on now. The other thing as well, just in terms of scrutiny, I like that you've got those red bits that I get to fill in about targets and what have you. But one of my frustrations, and not within this committee, but in general, is when we get documents and we're unable to see kind of deadline targets, etc. To us. So my question is, will we see that at a future date? Because without that, it's really hard to get an overall picture of what you're trying to put across.
I think the first point about financial sustainability, measuring that, I look to my colleague Jason. I'm sure he's got something in mind. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's a key element, isn't it? And I suppose there's a 91 in the moment, isn't there, to discuss that amongst other things. So completely, absolutely. And your wider point about actually when can we expect this? When can we hold you to account for this? Again, links into how we manage performance, how we understand delivery, how we monitor that, and how you challenge us on that. But absolutely, what we really want to have in here are those 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. This is what success looks like. We're not looking to get into the absolute, there will be 50% more of X or 20% more of Y, because I think that's where the service plans and that's where those more detailed conversations within service is about. How are we going to maintain our highways, or how are we going to respond to, I don't know, need in children's services? Forgive me, poor examples perhaps. But that will emerge, and that will also be what this committee is for, placed within this remit. So very much the intention. We don't want to just sit this with nice words. It's really lovely, but we don't know when. We really want to put down some timescales for this, so that you as members can hold us to account. But also you can say, look what this council's doing, and whether that be this year, next year, or 5 years' time, or whenever.
Thank you very much. Any further comments or questions around the room? Not seeing it. Do we have any online at the moment? Right, we've got Councillor Mansell. Okay, if we start with Councillor Mansell, then please.
Hello, yes, thanks very much. I have a couple of questions and a request, please. Um, and there will sort of be observations amongst those. And connected to that is that the sort of looking at the timeline and sort of hearing about this, there feels like there's little involvement of members in this process. This seems to look like a rare example. So we're not being too involved. Can I ask whether this report is going to go to the other scrutiny committees, or if it's only scheduled for the corporate one today? My second question is on the service improvement plans. What is the timing of those, and can a little bit be said about the content of those and how it relates to the business plan? And then thirdly, my comments on progress on the climate and ecological emergency, and how the council is doing that. And I have to say, I mean, obviously we've been through the reorganisation, but we do still have teams of officers in place. But it feels like work on that has slowed and quite possibly even stalled, because we're just not seeing any evidence of it being progressed. And that's a big concern, because it's an urgent agenda that the council needs to be working on. And at the moment, I'm not seeing evidence that this will be corrected in the business plan. I could make a whole number of suggestions for critical activities that I think the council should be doing in this area, but I will make sort of one in particular, which I've raised before. The council needs to be doing a energy development planning document, DPD, in advance of the local plan. We know the local plan is going to take a long time to do, and we cannot wait for the new planning policies needed. We should be making progress earlier, and the way to do that, which other authorities have done, is to do a DPD, particularly focused on energy matters, so we can get the right standards for new development, and we can look at the right locations for renewable energy generation in Somerset. That to me is absolutely vital, and we can't delay 5 years on it. We need to be getting on with it, and that's why that should be a critical activity being done as early as we can do in advance of the local plan, and then being part of it, but adopted once it's completed. For me, I would also include climate adaptation within that as well. Global heating is ongoing. We're seeing evidence that it's growing all the time, and we need the policies in place to start dealing with that. Again, we shouldn't be waiting. We need to start having these things done early. So I would actually ideally like to see an energy and climate DPD being progressed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Yeah, I mean, in terms of involvement of the other scrutinies, it's easy to say that papers have been published, but we will be making them available very directly to all members, saying this is where we are, we'd love to talk to you. And I know you said at the end of your question that you've got a number of other thoughts. It might be good if we had a chat about that, maybe outside the meeting. I'm not suggesting that you don't bring them up now, if the chair's willing, but I'm conscious of time and you probably want to have a bit of a conversation about it. That offers goes out to every single member as well, obviously. You might want to digest some of the things that we said today and have a conversation with some or all of us about it. That's I think how we make things happen, isn't it? So yeah, absolutely. Please, I hope that's a useful offer, and I'll be in touch after if that's okay. In terms more widely about the service improvement, as Councillor Lashon pointed out, we're not in a similar position as we might have been as an organisation which has matured, shall we say, after vesting day only 4 or 5 months ago. We have to define what those timescales are based on where we are as an organisation and how we want to go about doing that. Obviously, it would usually be an annual or at least annual refresh activity. That's to be defined, but obviously it's very much on the list because services need to be able to state what it is they're looking to do. So yeah, again, apologies. Normally it would be a case that we absolutely know the date, but where we are at the moment is we're in a different kind of year, shall we say, with everything else that's going on. Regarding sort of broadly the climate emergency focus, I know it's mentioned as in deliver the climate emergency strategy, but clearly there's a lot of activity within that. Trying to break that strategy down into a succinct briefing is not an easy job, because there's a lot of things in there, and we also want to make sure that we're reflecting those, whether it's things like pollinator action plan or whether it's an additional planning document. I'm not going to pretend to have planning expertise, but I will take your point back to the team and I'll have a conversation with them about some of the work that they're doing. Apologies for not being able to give a more sort of rounded or competent response, but it's not my area, I'm afraid to say. But I will take that message away. I think I've covered everything. Apologies if I haven't.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may, very quickly, thank you for that. That is helpful. Just on the content of the service improvement plans and how that relates to the business plan, I'm sort of imagining it as being much the same, but tailored for specific services. Am I thinking along the right lines?
Yes, precisely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Kay.
Sorry, that's it. Yeah,
But
thank you. I'm just, I'm not at home and I'm trying to do it from somewhere else. All right, thank you. What I noticed was, having been involved with the council plan, where we did 4 visions, and I was able to input into that, which was great. One of the visions was a greener, more sustainable Somerset. So my question is that I was a bit puzzled as to how we've now got 4 clusters that are categorised differently from those 4 visions. If I liked the analogy someone made earlier about the Russian dolls, and I had thought that, and one of your diagrams at the beginning of the presentation was that these things all flow from each other. So it would have been more logical to me to have had the visions then going into the clusters. Now, I can understand that another person made the point about financial sustainability, and I can understand why you've got a cluster about a sustainable council. So I can understand why you might have done that. But I just wonder if you could explain the logic of how that has changed. There isn't that sort of flow through. Again, I agree with some of the feedback that you've had from, I think, staff, which is that at the moment it is a little weak on sort of echoing some of the things that Dave has said, which I won't go into the detail, but it is a little weak at the moment. Just trying to find it. It just comes under something like a learning environment or something like that. No, not sustainable and effective council, but it's a healthy environment that supports physically, blah, blah, blah. And it says in there, Somerset is proactively climate and biodiversity conscious place. I really hope it will be. And I think that should be integrated into the values. And under there, you have got that you will deliver the climate emergency strategy, considering climate and ecological issues, and all we do. I actually think that needs to be broken down a bit and reflect what's in the vision. So, for example, there needs to be something in there. I don't know if it's going to be in the climate emergency strategy. I've not been involved in that. Some of the things we put in the vision, for example, about engaging with the farming community and making sure that we're more self-sufficient. There should be something in there about restoring biodiversity, etc. So like Dave and others, I do want to know how I can feed into this before it goes to the executive on the 4th of October. And at the moment, what it appears to me to be is a kind of a clumping together of all the plans, as one of the officers said, that we've committed to. And then we have got some gaps in there of things that maybe we still yet need to commit to. So in a way, it's a plan of plans. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, how that had changed in the process into becoming clusters, and how we can contribute and make suggestions about where other people also identified that we were lacking around the climate emergency and biodiversity emergency. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, first on your last point, I think you answered the questions I would have answered, I think, in terms of involving the members in developing this, and certainly the making sure that where there are gaps or indeed barriers, that they are identified and embraced. That's something that we are working on in terms of ongoing engagement with, certainly with staff, as you might imagine, is the nature of nature of the plan, but that's not to say that we don't want member involvement, clearly, because it very much does translate or begin to translate the council vision, the council priorities, council plan generally. Your point about climate emergency, climate biodiversity elements, similar feedback from others, we're pleased to hear regarding how that might break down, how that might look, how you might want to move that around so that actually it sits in the right place and it makes sense to people and it flows. Again, it's hopefully not defensive, but yeah, there is work to be done here. But hopefully, again, if it's bringing out these kind of challenges, then it's great because we know where we actually want to focus more. And certainly, also the climate and biodiversity aspects are really important. In terms of clusters, yeah. What we were trying to do was try to understand the vision priorities in a way that would allow us to bring together like types of activity. It's quite possible we won't use them, but also, and I think this is a piece of learning for us, is the way that we presented it for the purposes of this meeting and a couple others is there's a column on the left that we really should have had, which is which council plan, which council plan priorities do these relate to? So you get that kind of mix. What we're trying to understand and trying to make sense of is we've got lots of things going on which don't necessarily just hit one of the vision priorities, they hit several of them. And sometimes they look like they might not fit any of them, but actually what they really do mean is they fit all of them. We're just trying to make some sense of it so it kind of flows a bit more sensibly. That is not criticism of the council plan at all. That is a challenge for us to try and articulate it at that next levels down. Those cluster headings, they may well disappear. So we're happy to take that view. If we feel they are useful, we will make sure that we demonstrate that we're not attempting to rewrite council plan priorities. That's certainly not our intention. And things do actually connect up really well. We just use this as a little bit of a glue, if you like, to help us go to that next level, because you might imagine it's not easy to categorize things when actually they cover a multitude of activities, a multitude of end results we're looking for. But I do absolutely understand and respect what you said, because you're not the only one who said it for starters. The second thing, I think it is really valid, and we will address that.
Thank you. So can I just follow up on that? So is this business plan going to have smart targets in it? I think someone said, no, they're not. Someone else said, no, the smart targets, the timelines and all the rest of it is going to be in the service improvement plans. Is this business plan just the big picture, like I say, the plan of plans? And in which case, that column on the right hand side, will it have any kind of timeline in it that will show, like the first slide does, to be a sustainable council, like we've got to have our medium-term financial plan and all that sort of thing. We've got time for that. But for the other things, a bit like what kind of going back to what Dave Mansell was saying, it's like we need to have I'd like to see a date for when the carbon management plan, whatever it's called, is going to actually be done. Is it going to be done in a year's time? Is it going to be in 2 years' time? And then within that plan, that's where we might see the smart targets, where we have the, we're going to reduce carbon emissions by X amount or whatever. So I'm just trying to, again, see how all these Russian dolls fit together. So are we going to have some dates on the right hand side that say when these strategies are going to be actually produced and delivered? I realise officers are under a lot of pressure and that there are some priorities. Thank you.
Let's take them.
Yeah, thank you. It's worth bearing in mind that obviously each of these plan strategies should have action plans and appropriate targets with a proper methodology behind them, smart or otherwise, so that they can be measured either success or not. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of that performance management way of working, that performance management framework, that will be the place where that very deliberate, is this successful, is this doing as it should do, will be. In terms of the business plan up to this point, you're looking at that sort of 1, 2, 3, 5, maybe even 10-year horizon, doing things like population health, for example, in terms of, okay, what kind of difference will be made? So more of a sort of a broad, well, not broad, but a defined benefit or number of benefits that these activities together will attempt to deliver. If it does look like actually a smart target or another kind of target is actually valid and useful now, I don't see there being any problem in putting that in, because actually it's the way of measuring it. If we were thinking about the number of potholes we want to fill in, then a number or percentage or an amount of spend looks like it'd be perfectly fair. But if we're talking about, I don't know, population health generally, or well-being is probably a very good example. Measure. you might not necessarily want to put in a smart target because that's quite a challenging thing to define in the first place and to measure in the second place, and also to demonstrate, our involvement in that in the third place, potentially, depending on what you're looking at. So it's it's a bit of a juggling act. And what we really want to do is get to that point where we understand what success looks like. What does it look like? Good. What do we look like really well as an authority in the next? In a year, we'll have done certain things, but in 3 years, we'll have done more things. In 10 years, the sky's the limit kind of thing. How do we want to go there? And that helps us drive our planning, our activity, and how we measure ourselves. And at least as important is how you judge us as what we're doing, not just on our own, but obviously collectively together and with partners and with the public and community.
I'm sorry, I just want to come back again because I don't think you quite understood me. I understand how smart targets are developed in a service improvement plan, and I understand about the timeline there, and I understand that for a higher level plan, you can't always have a smart target in terms of like population health, for example. What I'm looking for, because this appears to be a plan of plans, what I'm looking for is dates for when these plans will be produced, and then the devil will be in the detail in the service implementation plans. So I've also, in terms of what success looks like, if you do want to put something in there, it doesn't always have to be something that's measurable. I understand that. It might have to be a straw poll thing about people's attitudes changing, for example. So I understand that. Can I write to you also with some suggestions about what success looks like? And I think other members may wish to do the same. And I don't know if you're going to put out an email about this, or if this is I don't know if you answered Dave Mansell's other question about whether it's only this committee that's looking at this, or whether other members will be invited to comment on this business plan. Thank you.
The final point, yes, we would like all members to comment on the plan. If other committees wish us to go there or would like to speak with us, then we're absolutely going. It's not a problem at all. Working on this being the principal committee for the business plan because of its role, but that's not to exclude anyone else, and we will be following up today with an updated, maybe not PowerPoint slide deck, but certainly an updated entity, if you like, an updated document, which we'll be sharing with all members, and inviting very much the comments that you'd like to put forward, and obviously as Councillor Mansell has also. That invitation is absolutely open to all members, not just between now and any deadline, but at any point ever. That's what we're here for. Apologies for not making, not giving you the answer that you were looking for, but in short,
okay.
That's
okay.
Short,
Thank you.
Those plans that exist, they will have or should have timescales on them, and we can translate those across. Some of the things that need to be done, which are new, whether that is a strategy or whether that's a particular piece of delivery. And again, I've mentioned the transformation program that's beginning to be developed. I should say that it is under development. Clearly, there will be milestones and timescales and when things will happen. Those things will exist as well. So yes, in some instances, to come in others, bound up in other things in others. Our job in the business plan is to make sure that that is in a way that is understandable and coherent, because that's a big purpose of the business plan. So that actually we know collectively as a council with our partners and our communities what we're actually here for.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Cancellation, you indicated that I'm going to conclude this section.
I did, Chair. I just wanted to say that actually this discussion has proved the value of scrutiny again. Because I think the words that are used don't make it clear how it flows down through from the council plan through to the delivery plans. And I think the word cluster probably is a bit misleading. Very happy to speak with Theo, Sarah, Alistair and colleagues. And I think what we're not saying is these are the visions for the new Somerset Council. This is how we'll achieve them. And here are the detailed plans of how we'll do that work when. And we have to put a caveat on all of that, which is that as we're asking staff to work on this, we're also asking them to work on budget savings for this year and the next year. And so they have to work within a big question, which is this achievable within our budget constraints? That just puts a further complication into the work that we're asking people to do. And we're asking them to do all of that and business as usual, all at the same time. But I think this has been really helpful, and I look forward to conversations that we'll be able to have resulting from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, certainly I think that as you heard, I think we're all aware that this is very much a work in progress. This is a document that's evolving. And again, I think from the comments you've made, but again, if we can re-emphasise the fact that we are going out to members again to encourage them to comment on this and make that very explicit to all members of council, so they can influence the way forward. I think again, members are going to be, I think all of us as members, it's easier sometimes for us when there's a bit more detail for you to get your teeth into, and it's when it's at the strategic level, it's almost more difficult in some respects. But I think it has been very useful to come forward. We do appreciate that there are other pressures on you as well. I think from my own view, I think it feels to me like it's on the right track as to where we're going, but we've got still work to do. And certainly in terms of, as further detail comes forward, the idea of schedules and timetables, I think is very useful for members to understand when things are coming forward, so we can be assessing as to how things are going. So hopefully, as I say, I think members generally, it's a good start to where we are, and you've got a lot more work to do, and we all appreciate the efforts going in from the whole team. So thank you very much. Thank you. And cancellation led us very nicely into the mention of budgets. So we move on to our next item on the agenda, which is the budget update, item 8. It's Mr. Vaughan. I think you're introducing this, or with cancellation. Do you want to open the?
Thank you, Chair. I think the introduction I would have made, I just did, which is that there is budget constraint everywhere we look, and that is not just local, it's national, of course, and we're hearing lots about it. So everything that you hear from us will be caveated by, is it achievable, is it affordable, and I won't apologise for that, because it's not something that's Somerset specific, it is a picture. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaughan. Do you want to introduce this then, please?
You're running out of battery. No, it doesn't look as does it? Keep going, well, it still works. So you've got some slides in front of you. I'm just going to go through the slides, give you a quick update on where we are, and then happy to take any questions, all those out. So,
and again, Mr. Vaughan, if I could just remind members that this was another one of the agenda supplements that was circulated. So it's not part of your main agenda pack. It's one of the supplements that if you want to follow it on your laptops.
Yeah. So if you go on to the first slide, please. So just in overview, of course, we're looking across multiple financial years, which I must admit, I have to really concentrate now and think which years that's referring to. So just trying to keep it simple, we are looking back at 22-23. We've got the Outton report, and that's your next item on the agenda. I'm going to do that in a bit more detail when we come to that one. Overall, Outton for Somerset as a council, when you add up all the 5 entities, was at £18.7 million overspend. Got the position in the terms of the current financial year, the budget monitoring report you received month 3 at your last committee. I've got a slide on what month 4 changes are, slightly improved position, but still £26.1 million of potential overspend. And then 24-25 and future years, our forecast made back in February was around £100 million of budget gap. So if you just go on to the next slide, in terms of 22-23 then, we have completed all audits related to 2021. There were a couple of outstanding audits from a couple of the districts. They've now been completed. We still have 3 outstanding audits relating to 21-22 for 3 councils. We are hopeful that they will be completed this month, and perhaps the audit committee on the 28th, I think it is, of this month, will receive those audit reports on those particular ones. We have completed the publication of all 6 statements of accounts for 22-23. You might say, well, I'm saying 6 because there's the 5 councils plus the pension fund as well. And we potentially might have one of those signed off this month as well, that again would go to audit committee. So we are making real progress in tackling the sort of backlog of audits. It's a real national problem, and we are working through them. It's a really important thing to get them all signed off and sorted as soon as possible. You will have seen Birmingham Section 151 officer has issued what's called a Section 114 notice, bankruptcy.
They have multiple years open in Birmingham, and that's part of the issue that there has been there as well. So I'm really keen that we get all our audits completed, know our starting point for Somerset Council, have that clean bill of health. I think that's really important for public accountability as well. In terms of the outcome report, that went to executive yesterday and is on the agenda, next item for here today. But I think now that we've completed all the work on the 22-23 statement of accounts for all authorities, that means we can move ahead with a number of the things that we've identified as part of the 17 sort of key action areas, such as reviewing reserves, and then we'll touch on those actually in the next report, but a number of the other areas as well, such as reviewing the capital programme and also our financial resilience and sustainability, etc. So we can really start to get to work now. I think now we've got the kind of base work done. If you move on to the next slide, in terms of 23-24, remember this budget was put together by adding effectively 5 councils together and then looking for the changes. It also included some use of reserves. It's split into 2 parts, really, the use of reserves. 9.9 million was for particular projects, and they are related to projects that end. But £10 million was to support the budget more generally, and meant we didn't cut services or reduce services or raise extra income. That clearly is not a sustainable position. Your reserves are a bit like your savings account. You can dip into them occasionally, but you can't keep doing it because eventually it runs dry. The month 4 position that we've done, it is on the next slide, is basically the month 3 position that come here with a number of updates. It's quite a difficult financial year, this one, as we are bringing all the services together from all the councils, getting them all into the same format and all in the same place. I think it will take us at least a whole year to get that fully sorted. So it's going to be quite a busy year as we work through those. If you go on to the next slide. So the month 4 position, like I say, it's an improved by £2.5 million compared to the month 3 position, but clearly still not where we want it to be. And the executive agreed the recommendations that come to you last month, the recovery plans that we're looking to put in place and the actions we're expecting service directors to take to reduce down this overspend. Just go on to the next slide is a summary of the capital programme. This is set out in the next report on the agenda to the committee. I just put it here to give you a kind of flavour of the size of the capital programme. So £99 million carry forward from 22-23, and a total capital programme that you'll see there of £430 million. So a sizable capital programme. So looking at the review of the capital programme, we'll look at the individual schemes, but one of the other things we want to do is look more. I think I'm just about to go. One of the other things we're looking to do on the capital programme, and I'm very aware of that next to me actually, because I know he's been banging on about this as a councillor for a little bit, is the timings of the starting of those schemes. Actually, there's been a traditional thing that you've seen, every scheme starts on the 1st of April and you spend the money across the year. Reality is hardly any schemes start on the 1st of April, they start at various phases through the year. So the actual phasing and the timings of those, we are actually looking at trying to pin it down to which quarter of the year they relate to. That should help us more accurately forecast the numbers. You just go on to the next slide, the last one. So looking forward then to next year's budget and the future years, back in February, we identified that was around about £100 million gap if we carried on providing the services in the same way and the funding we're expecting to receive from government and the controls they place on council tax and things like that. September is the kind of key month. This is when all the activity happens. So service directors and their officers in the finance team are working through now on the capital schemes that are coming forward. We're expecting a limited number of new schemes. There are some things we would have to do for health and safety reasons for legislation reasons, but we're not expecting significant new schemes on capital. Pressures, so those areas where we know there's pressures that could be related to contracts that we've already signed up, such as the waste contract that has an RPI increase in it based on a certain date and a certain indice, etc. And the final one, the savings options. So how will people obviously balance their budget? One of the actions we've already started to do is look at the funding. So when government give us our finance settlement last year, they confirmed a number of the figures for 24-25. So we've been updating that picture. It's quite a bleak picture when you actually look at the numbers and compare it to our services. We are expecting for general services a 3.7% increase in funding for next year. That's if you put up council tax by 2.99. When you think that pay award, the national pay award for staff is likely to be like 5%. Inflation was 10%, but dropping, so 8-ish, somewhere around there. That will be in a lot of our contracts. You can see we automatically have a problem. Our costs are going up more than our income. That's the basic problem we have. And therefore, you have savings to make. The other thing we're looking to do on the budget is a risk statement and bring together, I think this is kind of best practice that I picked up, Councillor Elation from other authorities around how we can do that. And the final one there on the bottom is monthly member engagement update sessions. We had the first of those in Yeovil in August, where we have Rob Whiteman and Mark Pickering from Zipper and Arling Close coming to talk to us. But we have set these up. So each month there'll be two. There'll be one that's in face-to-face in person, and there'll be one that's online. So I know not everybody will be able to make them. Some prefer online meetings, some prefer face-to-face. So we're giving you a choice on those. The purpose of those meetings will be to keep you updated on everything that's happening as we go through this. So I appreciate some of finance stuff is not always straightforward. It will change quite quickly over the next 3 months. So I hope those sessions will be beneficial to members. So that's a quick sort of run through of all the issues that there are around the sort of finances and finance update. I think from now on in, there's some, between here and February budget setting, it's going to be quite a busy period.
Thank you very much. Just before I come to members, and again, in terms of the monitoring, you remember at the last meeting, we talked about us having a monthly meeting to look at budget figures coming forward. That has now, I think members will all have those invitations sent out to them, so the dates are in the diaries. Also, today we just happened to be the wrong way around with the executive and scrutiny. Going forward, our meetings are in front of the executive meeting, so we can actually feed in to them, so that hopefully that will help with the process as well. But any questions or comments from members, please? No stunned silence. Okay, are there any comments from members online? You sure?
Sorry.
Okay, I've got Councillor Wilkins who's coming, and then I've got Councillor Collins, and then I'll go online. Okay, Councillor Collins first. No,
I'm not a finance expert, and thank you very much for explaining it so I can briefly understand it. Give us an idea. What percentage chance do you think we've got of following Birmingham in the next 3 years?
Nice easy question to start with.
Straight to the point. I like the same. So if we did nothing, so if we didn't address the current year's overspend, we didn't bother making any savings going whatsoever, you've got about 18 months. That's when you run out of money. So I suppose the analogy, and I think I used this as executive yesterday, is that, we can see the iceberg. We're saying, there's the iceberg. We're a big ship. You've got 18 months to take some action to avoid hitting the iceberg. Now, if you sit back and do nothing, you'll plough straight into the iceberg, and we kind of know what happens when that's the case. What's the actions you can take so that you don't hit the iceberg and you start to avoid it and you steer a course around it? We are, I think, when you compare us nationally to other councils, Rob Whiteman was quoted as saying that we're in the sort of bottom half of councils, but not in the bottom of those councils. There are things that we can do to move ourselves up those rankings fairly quickly, some of the actions that you can take as part of the budget. So I think we're sort of pretty close to the sort of middle of the pack, but at the bottom end of the middle of the pack. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I did speak to you and used your analogy at the executive meeting. I think that we could be heartened the fact where you've unlocked the binocular case on the Titanic, shall we say. And in fact, I think you did say that we have taken this seriously as a council, and it will mean that around the whole county, we are going to be going through some belt tightening scenarios. But I understand that the course has started to change. Is this right?
Yeah, I think if you look at those councils that got themselves into financial trouble, the ones that have Birmingham's and all the others before them, part of the issue is they didn't see the iceberg, frankly, or they chose not to see the iceberg, depending on how you want to view it. And I think not everybody in the council understood that, both officers and members. I think with the things we've been doing over the last few weeks, with the engagement sessions with members, etc., I think everybody's aware there's an iceberg. We are taking collective action. Officers are certainly taking it seriously. I'll look at Liz in terms of her executive colleagues, but we have a monthly MTFP board set up to kind of steer the ship and coordinate our activities so that we don't hit the iceberg and take those corrective actions. So from my point of view, yep, it's a real problem. We can see it's a problem, but we are starting to do the work to address that. Thank you. Cancellation.
Thank you. I do actually have some notes here from the Rob Whiteman's briefing, which I found. I first listened to him at the LGA conference at 8:15 in the morning, which was actually addressed as section 114. What does it mean for councils? And at 8:15 in the morning, the room was full. And there were journalists in there as well. I'm sure the journalists were on the door taking note of who was walking into the session. But some of the things that I've written down kind of wrote down from what stayed in my mind from his presentation. So I've got councils that have failed, have not acknowledged or addressed their financial situation, and that's exactly what Jason just said. He also said councils that have failed have had an overly optimistic leadership. I think that's where we need that kind of reality check. He also said, he talked particularly about councils that have failed with an over-reliance on commercialisation. So those are the Wokings and the Thurrocks, and I'm not terribly sure that you'd call it commercialisation. I think you call it failure of commercialisation in those councils. And then he made a really interesting point that he said nobody talks about the councils that faced difficulty and found a way through it. Windsor and Maidenhead is one of those examples, and of course their previous chief executive was Duncan Sharkey. So nobody talks about Windsor and Maidenhead because they found a way through it. And he also talked about not continually looking back, looking forward, but I think that we need to use the past to inform the future and make sure that we include the evidence that we have gained from our past knowledge to use as we plan for the future. So if anybody wasn't able to attend that session, there is a recording of it, and I do really recommend it. The Treasury management stuff gets a bit more detailed and is linked to a slide presentation, but Rob Whiteman just speaks from experience and knowledge, and he is really worth listening to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trimnall and then Councillor Rodriguez.
It's just a quick comment because Councillor Collins, you just said that you're not a financial expert, and I think very many of us aren't. When I first came here, when I first started a district council, I didn't have a clue. I've had to learn as I went along. But I just wanted to point out, I don't know if it's still available, but you did some financial training right at the beginning of last year when we were all elected. And if that's still available, then I keep meaning to go back because I might understand it a bit more now, actually, with hindsight. So for anybody who's watching, who's thinking, I just can't get my head around this financial stuff, perhaps if that is definitely available, perhaps it could be reshared or something so that people really do have an understanding or some level of understanding anyway about how our finances work.
Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to share that. And we're very happy to do some more training. Because I do know when you first become a councillor, gosh, there's so much about everything to take on board, isn't there? I know finance is the most exciting of all the subjects, and it'll be the one you go to most. But you know, there might be some other things that distract you. So yeah, we're very happy to both make that available, but also do more if members want some more briefings on stuff. I think my experience and the feedback from members is they prefer shorter sessions rather than sort of 4 hours of finance. Isn't perhaps the most exciting evening of your night, of your life. So regular bite-sized sort of type of approach. We're very happy to do whatever members want, to be honest.
Well, I'm a member who would say yes, please. That would be really interesting. And I think, yeah, actually that bite-size, focusing on a particular aspect, you know, we're going to talk about the capital and revenue budgets, or just smaller chunks so that we sort of get that chance to come away from it and remember everything.
Councillor Rodriguez.
Thank you. I'm aware that there are some policy directions, without naming any in particular, which the council's actively taking kind of decisions on, which results in a reduction in revenue. And so I'm just wondering, without naming any in particular that's in my mind, considering that financial situation that we're in, are these sort of policy decisions or policy kind of I don't know, routes, I suppose, being reviewed to kind of bring a pause to that? I won't name the one I have in my mind, but there certainly is that happening at the moment.
I'm going to run out of battery soon. So are you talking about policies from predecessor councils? Tell me exactly what you're talking about, if you can, please.
Well, I don't want to really mention it in particular because there may be others as well, but around transport, there may be a policy direction which the council is taking, which results in a reduction in income revenue, and that will obviously have a negative impact on the budget. And there may be other reasons for that, but I think the financial sustainability is top priority. And that's my concern, is that I would be looking at these kind of policy directions to bring a pause to some of those things.
Like you, I can't talk about any particular policy, except to say that we have to have realistic ambitions and expectations. We know what this council's priorities are as overarching statements. We've just talked about how that feeds through into the business plan, and I do completely accept that that's not terribly clear in places. And I think the use of the word cluster actually truly hasn't helped anyone. If there are places where we have to change the approach, then we have to be really clear and transparent in how we work, because what we talk about is the need to maximise opportunities. And sometimes, this is a general comment, so not about this council or any other council, sometimes in business as well as in councils, it's easy to take a change in approach that actually stops you maximising opportunities. So you take a short-term decision. I've had to do this in my workplace. Sometimes you have a risk. It's a risk. You have a risk of taking a short-term decision that stops an opportunity further down the line. And that's the really difficult decision to take. because you have to get that balance right between taking short-term decisions that demonstrate fiscal responsibility, because we must do that, without keeping a view of the medium term and where you're looking for opportunities. So something that I did at my previous district council was we went through a process of establishing what our risk appetite was. I would suggest that that work we did just before COVID, if we did it now, it might look a bit different. And so we were saying then that we were risk aware but creative in our thinking. I think what's going to be really difficult, and I'll be really interested in the work that Sarah Scrutiny does, is exactly how we get that balance right between risk and opportunity. Everyone used to do the SWOT analysis, didn't they? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and now they all do risks and opportunities. If the risks stop the opportunities further down the line, then in the longer term, you can, in business or anywhere else, do more harm than good in the longer term. But in order to achieve the longer term, you need to show fiscal responsibility in the short term. Otherwise, as Birmingham now know, the government commissioners come in and they take probably much more brutal decisions because they are just looking at the finances. So we've got to have that balance. I have to work with my executive colleagues so that they don't just think that I'm the absolute pain in the neck who is constantly being too much of a check and a balance, but they have to listen to me. And in my previous life, it's like the relationship between the director of a film or a play and the producer. The director sets the vision, the direction. The producer is the check and the balance, but is the enabler and the blocker. And when you get a really good triumvirate, you get a really good director, a really good producer, and you have a really good third person who's the comms person, who actually gets that balanced message between what the director is looking to achieve, what the producer is making possible, and then somebody else gets that out to the public. And that's what I think we've got to do. And it's not going to be easy. I don't mind admitting it's not going to be easy. But I know what it looks like to face a really difficult position. We did it in 2011 when all the arts funding was cut at the county and at Mendip. And, it felt like looking down the barrel of a gun. And the person who helped me through that was a former chairman he was called in those days, of the county council, who talked me through it day by day and week by week. And he taught me how to keep my head down, look for the opportunities on both sides of the budget. So how do you generate more income? How do you save expenditure? And that was actually all tied up with initiatives, environmental initiatives, and about technology and about automation of things. Many years ago, of course, that's moved on a lot now. And we put something together, and by about the fourth meeting I had with him, I put together my package of what I thought I could do and where I could raise the money. And he said, finally, I like that, I'll help you deliver it. And he did. And we raised, it's different in the arts, we raised all the money, we didn't have loans, we didn't have to pay it back, but we achieved it. But so you need people who can do that work, and it's difficult work. And this is a massive team. I was working in a very small team then, but leadership is the same. I'll stop banging on because I can talk on this stuff for hours and I won't. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions in the room. We have got online, Councillor Chilcott.
Thank you very much, Chair. So obviously for me, I'm hugely concerned about the financial position, as I hope we all are. I think 151 has talked about a period of 18 months. Just to put that into context, we've all been councillors in this period for 16 months, and it goes like a blink. So for me, there's several things. Looking at the very first slide we had today, which had the 3 circles on it. If we looked at the outturn for 22-23 at an overspend of 18.7 million, and bring that into the current potential overspend of 26.1 million, bringing that into context, and that's only 16 months of trading, shall I call it, that would have used all of our general reserves. Those 2 figures, we were at mid-40s in general reserves. So within 16 months, that is what's happened. So there needs to be massive change. And when I look at the 3rd circle there, which is talking about 24-25 and the 100 million, of course, if we don't get the overspend under control this year, you will have to add another 26, 30, 20 million to that. And then it's when it reaches the realms, when does it become not doable and doable? And I think that's what our 151 will be grappling with. So I think the concerns are there. We all need to be concerned. We had a great piece by SIPFA, and I agree with that. But I think my question, I suppose, initially is, we've got an action plan. I know there's great optimism around that. I mentioned it last time and this time. There's nothing measured. There's no dates in it. There's no sort of targets within the year in it. So my question would be, and again, you might need it, Jason, I had this yesterday, you might need to send it, is since that action plan and the actions were put into place, how much has been saved? Because at the moment, that ship isn't turning. It's still heading towards the iceberg. And at the moment, all that really great hard work at the moment is not manifesting itself in bringing the overspend down. I'm happy if you'll comment on that, but those are my concerns. I know I've voiced them to you, you privately, and I will continue to voice them. And Liz, I know what a difficult job it is.
Who wants to go first, with Dawn or cancellation?
If I could just go first, just to say those words about optimism, they're not in my vocabulary at the moment. Reality is in my vocabulary. Hard work is clearly there. The press release that the council put out was about the council becoming not viable within 2 years. I think we are being quite consistent in our messaging. With the overspend for last year and the draw on reserves, that is not sustainable. We know that. Jason has been as clear as anybody can be that it is not a sustainable position. So for the current year, we're doing a combination of our own actions, which is the work that officers are doing. And we've had dates in September in, I can't remember which of the papers, about when officers had to come forward with savings, and that has been driven through each of the service directors and then up through to the executive leadership team. We have already looked at some use of reserves. We cannot allow that to be more than the absolute minimum. And we're also looking at the lobbying of government that I was interested to read this morning is now also being led by the leader of Surrey County Council, who chairs the CCN group. When Surrey are talking seriously about viability, you know that things are really difficult, because if we put up our council tax as a unitary council by 1%, that brings in another 3.2 million. When we looked at the Surrey figures a good few years ago, 1% on council tax was between 7 and 8 million, because there are many homes, it's not such a rural area, and those homes are higher banded. So all those things about council tax base, we won't go into them now, but I do find them really interesting, because once again, I use that term of the past informs the future. I was around in 17, 18 and saw what happened very quickly when the finance director left, and we suddenly realised how difficult things were and what that situation was. Things become a crisis when you don't see them coming and you don't plan for them. What we're doing here is we're seeing it and we're planning, and we're clear where we're planning, where we find drawn reserves could be acceptable in this year, But once those reserves are gone, they're gone. We've got government, Deluxe, saying, I think it was Michael Gove who said it, that he's not keen on councils having reserves. I'd just like to ask him one thing. If councils didn't have reserves, what would have happened over the last year and what will happen over the next year? So it is a really difficult thing. Everybody knows that running a business with no reserves at all, nothing, you very soon get into not being a going concern. So it's the point at which I've seen arts organisations, including in Somerset, having to accept that they're not a going concern overnight. And the truth is, very often, as Rob Whiteman made it clear, that organisations have not addressed their real position early enough. And I believe, sitting here today, that is what we're doing, that we are addressing it at the right time. Still not going to be easy.
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. Anything you want to add? Or no? Okay. Councillor Chilcott, anything final?
Yeah, just to say, just finally, I think I understand that and I hear that, but I think that message we had last year, we had an 18.7 million overspend. We are hearing that message again, understandably, this year, and by month 4 we're at 26.1. I think it's a very, shall I say, challenging, and we are absolutely storming through the reserves at an alarming rate. But I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments. Okay. All I was going to say was just. Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Chair, to say, in fairness, the words stark and challenging are in the introductory paragraph. We're not hiding from that.
No, absolutely. Okay, thank you. I think as members have said, it's part of the first thing is identifying the issue, and certainly that's well and truly identified now that we know where we are. It's where we move from here. I think the comment that's been made about information being imperative to get to members is absolutely right, and I think it's all members. I think there is a tendency, and I know from being a member for some time, you sometimes don't worry about the money, you're interested in the nice fluffy stuff. The problem is the fluffy stuff, it can't happen without the money, and if this doesn't get addressed, that there is a real issue. So I think all members need to be encouraged as strongly as possible to be attending these briefings so that we all understand the background of the position we're in. Absolutely, and certainly as the Vice Chairman just said, the implications of what happened. So we know there are difficult discussions about both the finance and the services that we provide that will be coming forward. But we also need to be aware, as was I think our last meeting explained with the section 114, if that happens and the inspectors come in, it's the discretionary services stop pretty much I think immediately, and you just get left with your statutories, which would be a huge impact on residents of our county. So I think we all appreciate the situation that we're heading into, but we need to make sure that, as I say, everyone is kept aware of those. And efforts are being made both through the executive and through scrutiny that this is being watched now on a very regular basis and will be feeding back to us as to how things move forward, as was highlighted. We all need to know what timetables are going to be, but that will come out, I think, of some of the discussions going forward. But I don't envy your cancellation to be there. I think you use the word blocker, but I think there are times that, as you say, there might be times when you're having to have very difficult conversations with colleagues from across the council.
The Chair, I did refer to a producer being both enabler and
absolutely.
Yeah. So the enabler bit's important.
Absolutely happy to identify you as both. Okay, thank you, members. Oh, Steve, if you want to just comment, and then we're going to move on to the next financial item.
No, Chairman, I was just going to offer my apologies for the rest of the meeting, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you very much. So, members, if you turn to your next item on the agenda, which is the last one that we're going to be dealing with today, which is the consolidated outturn, which to some extent follows on from where we've been. But Mr. Vaughan, do you want to go first, or cancellation?
Chair, I think we've actually conflated the two reports really of monitoring and outturn. I think the bit that's really of interest to members here is the consolidated reserves and the consolidated capital programme. And the executive for October is to have the reserves following review, so the amalgamated reserves following review. And at executive yesterday, Councillor Chilcott was talking about how reserves are identified. And one of the things that I felt would be really useful is a clear demarcation between what are usable reserves for this council and the unusable reserves, because it's really easy to see a very large figure, but much of those reserves belong to other organisations for which the council is an accountable body. I don't really have anything else to add. Thank you.
So on this one, you did get an amended paper, and it's a very minor thing on page 59 and page 60, the table 7 capital projects. You'll notice on the initial reported pack, there's some of the figures highlighted in yellow. We had a bit of ranking demons in the system, where we rounded to 4 decimal places rather than 3, so all the numbers are the same. In the revised number, you'll see this due replacement of laptops. It reads as 0.01 rather than the 5 following it. So that's the only change. Yeah, I was just going to focus on the reserves bit, because in terms of a council, for me, they are the kind of test of your corporate health. This is the thing that really matters. When you've got no reserves is when, frankly, it will go horribly wrong. So on page 56 of the report, you will see there's figures in table 3 of the general reserves position of all 5 councils, even £26.8 million closing position. Compared to the risks we're facing as a council, we've talked about some of those in terms of some of the pressures. Back in February, for council, you agreed to set a range of between 30 and 50 million pounds. So to restore them to that level, executive yesterday agreed to transfer 23 million pounds from earmarked reserves. If you go on to page 57, so table 4 then gives the summary of the earmarked reserves. I think this picks up on Councillor Leishon's comments. You can look at the bottom line here and say we've got 288 million pounds. That's pretty good. We can go home today and not worry about making savings. But actually, what you've got to look at is we hold 131 million pounds worth of funding on behalf of other bodies. So it's unfortunately not our cash to spend. So you need to take that out of the equation. You'll see in table 5 then actually shows you what the real position is for Somerset Council and the commitments against those earmarked reserves and where we are. The report also then goes on to talk about the capital outturn position, and as a result of the carry forwards in table, let me go back to table 6, table 6 on page 58. There will actually, some of that recommendation, those carry forwards will go to full council at the next meeting, just to clarify those carry forwards can go forward. So there's an awful lot of pages of information here of all 5 councils. So I think that's a helpful overview of the position rather than delving down to all the detail. But I'm happy to go into the detail of that as well. Thank
you very much. Can I just ask one little bit of clarification to some extent, and that's just to explain members the difference between the non-allocated reserves and the ones that have been set aside, because when we're now saying the earmarked are now being transferred to being non-earmarked, how does that work?
So we have 2 types of reserves in very simple terms. There are more than that. But in very simple terms, the ones that are to do with real cash and your cash, as opposed to somebody else's cash, there are 2 types. So general reserves, which is your fund or the rainy day kind of fund, as people refer to when things go wrong. Councils, they always do, and guaranteed. That's to your general reserves. Your earmarked reserves are where you as members have decided to put money aside for a particular project. And I do say you as members because officers can't do it, actually. But that's in the Constitution, one of the safety valves that there is. Within those earmarked reserves, though, each of the councils, we all come up with very different names when you look at the whole list, because we're all, who says accountants aren't inventive, but we are, when you look at it. We come up with a variety of things called MTFP smoothing reserves, funding volatility reserves. They're all the bits that go there to cover all the bits in the budget when it goes wrong. So it's those that we're looking to transfer into the earmarked reserves. And what we agreed yesterday at the executive is that the executive will get a full list of all the reserves as we amalgamate them. So if you look, there's some common reserves across the piece, again, called slightly different names, things like commercial investment reserves and things like business rate reserves. We're bringing them all together. So there'll be one comprehensive list of this is the overall reserve position. So wait to the October report, it will be a lot simpler rather than having 5 bits of paper you need to look across.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from members, please? Yeah, Councillor Rodriguez.
Just a quick one then, just to follow on that. In terms of that smooth out reserves thing, do we know what therefore is left in those smooth out reserves now they've been moved over, or is that all that kind of?
That's part of the work we'll do and clarify for the October and set them all out, because we have called them all slightly different things. And there are some individual reserves that as a council you want to still keep going forward. So I think that's simple from the form of accounting would be things like the insurance reserve, where you absolutely do need to particularly set money aside for a particular purpose. Things like PFI reserve, where we've got future commitments. A lot of the other reserves are for particular projects. Some of those are ongoing and will continue. Some of those, actually, when we started looking at it, haven't been touched for 3 or 4 years, and therefore can be repurposed. So that's what we'll present back to you as members in October.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from members? I'm not seeing any in the room. Are there any online? No, okay. Well, there's cancellation, so we sort of covered under the previous report as well. So thank you very much for that. Thank you again for the information that's gone forward. I know the huge amount of work that's gone into drawing all these together has been massive, and as it does become one set of accounts, hopefully it will be that much clearer. And again, we'll have to see going forward in terms of expenditure. I mean, just looking not so much on the reserves, but generally, I think we're all aware that there are pressures in adults and children particularly, and as a former district member, one of the concerns I've always had is that you don't see all the services that are the non-statutory being sacrificed to keep filling gaps elsewhere. So again, it's going to be a difficult set of discussions for us to have over the coming months and years. Thank you all very much. Moving on then, item 10 on your agenda was kitchen installation contract. That is not an item on the agenda anymore. That's being dealt with through another route. It will be coming, I understand, to a member briefing and then to another committee, I think, is dealing with it. So we don't need to worry about that one. So can I thank you all very much for your attendance today. Again, thanking both members and officers who are present for the work that's gone into the presentations that's gone to us today. Sorry for some of the IT issues we had both to get meetings started, and I sincerely hope we will have sorted the microphones by the next time we're back in the Sedgemoor room. But thank you all very much for your attendance, and thank you, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you.